Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Antoine van Akmaal. I'm one of the Brookings trustees, and I might add, a great admirer of Bruce's Metropolitan Program. So I'm pleased as pink to welcome you here to what I think promises to be a topic that is both very important and exciting. Important because I believe that advanced industries are the key to our competitiveness as a nation. And exciting because, frankly, there's a good story to tell here, as Bruce will do. And let me illustrate that by something that I personally experienced. I've been going to Asia basically all my professional life, 40 years, a couple of times a year. And 3 years ago, I was talking to companies, as I always do. And what did they tell me? They complained about American competition. Let me repeat that. They complained about American competition. I was blown away. I had not expected that. Then other companies started telling me that they were building their next plant not in China, no, in the United States. Something was happening. Now here I am. I coined the word emerging markets. I've been doing this professionally all my life. Wrote a book called The Emerging Market Century. And so I'm committed to the idea that the emerging markets are important. I even talked about the fact that the competitive edge was shifting in that direction. Well, I think things are changing. And as Pat Moynihan once quipped, we're all entitled to our own opinions. We're not entitled to our own facts. And the facts on the ground are changing. And they're changing quite considerably. Why? I think if you put it in a nutshell, what mattered over the past 25 years was who could make things the cheapest. But the paradigm is shifting. What's going to matter over the coming 25 years is who can make things the smartest. And that is where actually advanced industries come in. And where the United States and Europe, the old economies, have a new competitive edge. They have a clear advantage, at least if we don't screw it up. And we could. Global competition is a little bit like war. You don't fight it with the enemy's weapons, you fight it with your own new weapons that are surprising to them. So advanced industries cater to the crucial strength that knowledge economies, and the United States and Europe are knowledge economies par excellence, that we have. That is what makes this topic important. Not focusing on this is, well, it's just plain stupid. So it's time, I think, to start changing our mind, to stop being down in the dumps and looking at the glass half empty and recognize that the old economies cannot be counted out so easily. There's a lot of life left into them. Instead of being price takers, we are becoming trend setters again. I mean, we know that from high-tech services like Google, Apple, Amazon, Uber, Facebook, all these names. But you now also see it happening, not just in services, but also in manufacturing. And again, Mark will talk about that. Sophisticated pacemakers. Did you know the United States has a monopoly on sophisticated pacemakers? Wearable devices are being researched here, also in Northern Europe, that monitor our health. Self-driving cars, smart tires that use sensors to adapt to both weather and road conditions. A new generation of robots, drugs that use genomics to target diseases. And these are just a few examples. Now, we can be grateful, I think, to Silicon Valley and MIT, who taught us, again, how to innovate. but in a completely new, more open, more collegial way, essentially, and this is the key, by sharing brain power in open innovation, rather than operating within academic or corporate silos. They already knew this at Bell Labs, but we had kind of forgotten it, and that really had a high cost. It had a disastrous impact on innovation. All over the country, and Bruce and Mark and we, because I'm together with a co-author writing a book on this, we've been visiting all these places from Akron and Albany. I mean, places that you would not have expected. We're not talking MIT and Silicon Valley. Akron, Ohio, Albany, Seattle, where I met you there, and Portland, and then in Europe, places like Eindhoven in Holland, that Bruce has also visited, Zurich, Stuttgart, Lund. These are places where a hell of a lot is happening. In those places, basically, and this is the key, and this is what actually makes innovation much more efficient, and we have learned the trick of that. It's just simply universities, big companies, small companies, startups, all working together, government officials, no longer waiting for Washington, but cooperating in new ecosystems that very efficiently translate inventions into new products. Let me just give you an illustration of that. I was told by a venture capitalist that it used to cost $10 million to create a prototype. Now, with 3D printing and this sharing by all these little startups, these young whippersnappers, for whom this is second nature, it can be done for $50,000. That's Moore's law, but then not in semiconductors, but applied to innovation. So even long-lost industries are coming back and becoming advanced industries. We heard from Phil Knight here of Nike, who, when I asked him, can you make a shoe by robot? He said, well, we're already making the Olympic shoes with robots. And so these industries, to everyone's utter surprise, are going to come back. Things are going to be produced where they're consumed more and more. So the result is a whole new spirit of innovation based on integrating what we're best at, on integrating IT, sensors, wireless communication, new materials, medical discoveries, into what I call brain factoring, what Bruce calls advanced manufacturing. And this is so advanced that it's hard to match, especially now that Chinese labor is becoming more expensive and our energy is becoming cheaper. I believe that will really upset the apple cart of competition, and that's important. So Bruce will discuss all of this later. But I think the news is surprisingly good, even for jobs, as he will tell you. Let me just say that I believe we'll soon have to worry more about job training than job losses. So Bruce Katz, Mark Muro, and their whole team at Metro are what I would call true out-of-the-box thinkers, and as usual have been onto this new reality earlier than most. And at this conference, they'll tell you about it. So let me introduce Bruce, who has long experience as a practical policymaker and an innovative researcher, and who is someone who does not take conventional wisdom for granted. Thank you, Bruce. He will be your guide to the concept of advanced industries and define it for you. Knowing him, I'm sure you're in for a real treat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Antoine. And thanks to everyone who's come here today, and for the folks who are in the extra room and the folks listening by webcast. This has been a long time coming. You don't do these reports overnight because the methodology and the data is so difficult to pull together. So I'm Bruce Katz. I'm co-director of the Metropolitan Policy Program with Amy Liu. And first of all, just a thank you to Mark Muro and his team, because there's a lot of brain damage that went into this effort. Jonathan Rothwell, Scott Andes, Kenan Fikri, Sid Kulkarni, thank you. They took on this small task of basically defining the driving industries in the United States that we call advanced industries. And in doing so, if public policy makers and private decision makers listen, I think we have a path for a stronger, more productive, more inclusive economy. Advanced industries are the prerequisite for broadly shared prosperity, something that we desperately need in this country. Another thank you goes to Don Barton. You'll hear Don. He'll moderate the first panel, and his colleagues at McKinsey. They have been intellectual partners with Brookings and have helped us on the ground in places like Tennessee and places like Colorado to basically market test this definition of advanced industries. So Dom, a trustee at Brookings, thank you. To the CEOs who've come here today, thank you for participating. There's a group of corporations and individuals who have helped us get this report done with their financial support. So I just want to call out Alcoa and Antoine and Lear and Microsoft and the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, and Rob Roy with Switch Communications and Siemens. So thank you very, very much for that support. And finally, you'll all hear from Governor McAuliffe later, and I'll show you some of the statistics from Virginia that I think will be really interesting to help us rethink what that state is all about from a competitiveness posture. So Anton quoted Daniel Patrick Moynihan. I'll quote George Bernard Shaw at the beginning of this. It should be almost a motto for the Brookings Institution. The sign of an educated person is to be deeply moved by statistics. So please forgive me, right, as I provide some context for this report. First, it's clear that the recovery is well underway. We've had 58 months of consistent job growth in this country. The unemployment rate has dropped from a high of 10% to below 6%. But as the cyclical stresses of the recession recede, they're revealing the lingering structural issues that we need to deal with in the economy. Wages that have stagnated for decades, as this slide shows, and have remained too low for many workers. An economy that has relied too long on consumption and less on production and the innovation that production provides. And as we look abroad, rising competition, not really just from low-skilled labor, but from countries that are catching up and exceeding the United States in productivity and innovation. So in response, we think, and we've said for a long time out of Brookings Metro, the United States needs a new growth model. And one critical component of that model is advanced industries. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to cover what advanced industries are, where they are located, and why they matter, particularly today. So let's talk about the what. It's clear that the nature of our economy is changing, the relentless pace of innovation, the blurring distinction that we'll hear a lot about of many different types of enterprise, such as manufacturing and services, the digitization of everything. So it really demands a change in how we talk about the economy. So we think what's emerging is a super sector of advanced industries, manufacturing, energy, and services that are R&D intensive and concentrate our STEM workforce. So these advanced industries obviously create technology, they deploy it across the economy, they drive regional and national prosperity. So what are these industries? When we looked at this R&D intensity and STEM intensity, what we come up with are 35 advanced manufacturing industries, aerospace, auto, medical equipment, as well as 3 energy industries and 12 high-value services industries, software, computer systems and design, data processing, and hosting. So these industries punch way above their weight. They have 12.3 million jobs. That's 9% of our employment in the U.S., 17% of private sector GDP, 60% of our exports, 80% of our engineers and patents, and they invest more than 90% of private sector R&D. And as Antoine has said, in the last several years, these are the industries that have driven the American economy forward. So these industries matter because they're not just providing jobs, they're providing good jobs. They're providing quality jobs. Over the past 30, 40 years, advanced industries, unlike the rest of the economy, have provided steady wage growth. And partly thanks to this continued growth, advanced industries provide a significant wage premium to their workers at every single level of education. Now, this matters because these workers in advanced industries are not all scientists and engineers educated with PhDs at MIT or Stanford or Carnegie Mellon. Half of advanced industry jobs receive less than a four-year degree, or the workers receive less than a four-year degree. And these are good, accessible jobs that provide wage premiums of 40 to 50 to 60% over comparable jobs outside of advanced industries. Now, their impact on the broader economy radiates further. They develop technologies that transform lives. They drive productivity in other sectors. They support long supply chains critical to state and national economy. And of course, they stimulate the local economies and they drive job growth in the communities where their workers reside. When you add it all up, we've got 12 million direct jobs in advanced industries. We've got another 27 million positions supported by this. Together, that's over 1/4 of the US workforce. So let's talk about the where, because we are the Metro program. So we care about where all this comes to ground. As to the geography of this super sector, it is widely distributed across the United States, but it's differentiated. It's not an even distribution. Overall, 70% of advanced industries activity occurs in the nation's largest 100 metropolitan areas. Those are the metros over about 500,000. They're about 2/3 of our population, about 3/4 of our GDP. Given that every single large metropolitan area contains at least a few thousand advanced industry jobs, the depth of the metro specialization varies widely, and the nature of it varies widely as well. 38 of the largest 100 metros are basically manufacturing-oriented advanced industry sectors, and you see Wichita, aerospace, Palm Bay, Boise City. A few metros are heavily involved with energy, not surprising to anyone in this room, Houston, but also Salt Lake City, Birmingham, Alabama. Another 17 metros are tilted to services, Boston, our home metro of Washington, D.C., and Denver. And finally, and this is really interesting to focus on, there are about 13 metros in the United States that host deep, balanced, advanced industry bases. And there's some surprises here. San Jose is not just a software mecca. It's not just the Facebook economy. It's also a center of production and manufacturing tied to those tech services, particularly in places like Fremont, California, where Tesla is located. On the other hand, Detroit, which is the iconic American manufacturing metropolis, is also a leader in data processing and engineering services. So at a time when cars are basically computers on wheels, many metro economies sit at the intersection of manufacturing and services, production and innovation, digital and material. It's clear that every metro and state has their distinct advanced industry profile, and understanding your starting point is really critical to supporting those industries, right? It's not ubiquitous in the United States. It's highly differentiated. So let's take a random state, Virginia, right? The governor's coming. 442,000 advanced manufacturing jobs. That's 11% of the state's employment. It puts Virginia above the national average. Look where they tilt. They tilt towards services, evidence of the strong influence of the DC metropolis, specializations in computer data, systems, consulting, engineering services, the huge wage premium for advanced industries in Virginia and, frankly, in Maryland and the entire metropolis, right? 7 of the 10 counties are among the wealthiest counties in the country. So Virginia is the 5th most advanced industry-intensive state in the country. And that's why we invited Governor McAuliffe to talk today. So let's talk about the why and what to do about this, because at Brookings, we obviously want to focus on where we head. There's the data. Why does this matter? Because the U.S. leadership is eroding in the 3 main factors, in our view, subnational level, that drive the competitiveness of these sectors. A strong innovation system that commercializes research and ideas for the market, a robust skills pipeline that give workers the skills they need to compete, and dynamic regional ecosystems of large corporations, small and medium-sized enterprises, universities, investors, and workers who collaborate to compete on the global stage, right? It takes an ecosystem of advanced industry to compete. As we begin to assess ourselves against these measures, we've got some work to do in this country, and frankly, we're going to have to do a lot of it without the national government participating. While the U.S. maintains a formidable technology development base, R&D investments are slipping, and as you see here, our R&D as share of GDP has slipped behind the competitors like Korea, Japan, and Germany. Second, we need to acknowledge that the nation has developed serious skills deficits by comparison to our competitors. Antoine mentioned this. We could go through chapter or verse a whole bunch of depressing metrics on U.S. education, but for now, I think it's just important to focus on the U.S. students and young workers' low participation in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, which should really come as no surprise to anyone, considering that we basically dismantled our vocational education system in the United States over the past 30 years. I was telling Eric Spiegel from Siemens, we took a group of about 30 mayors and business leaders over to Munich to look at the Siemens plan in Nuremberg and understand the apprenticeship model in Germany and how it can be adapted and tailored to the United States. And finally, Americans need to realize that the nation has allowed the advanced industries platform of our metropolitan innovation ecosystems to atrophy. Advanced industries cluster in specific places where they secure those inputs they need to compete globally. Over the past 3 decades, basically, we've seen a hollowing out. In 1980, on the left, 50 of the country's largest metropolitan areas had at least 10% of their workforce in advanced industries. By 2013, on the right, only 23 major metros contain such sizable concentrations. So the bottom line is less than half as many large metropolitan areas in our country now have the kind of deep supplier bases, the talent pools necessary to support advanced industry growth. That's something that we really need to focus on, again, not just at the national level, at the state level, at the metropolitan level, at the regional level. So here's the bottom line. Advanced industries, this is a super sector. It's pivotal, but its viability in this country is threatened. To restore our competitiveness will require cross-sector collaboration, so-called triple helix in the European term, from public, private, and civic leaders at all levels of our federalist system. And obviously, it's also we're going to require, and this is where the feds really matter, some change in the macro rules governing tax and trade. This is critically important. We think this report is really the beginning of an effort to change the narrative around the economy we want to build in this country, and then change the actions of state and local governments in alliance with their corporate, civic, and university leaders. With that, I'm going to turn it over to some of those private sector leaders to talk about the opportunities and challenges for advanced industries. There is no one better to moderate this panel than Don Barton. He's the managing director of McKinsey & Company. He's a trustee here at Brookings, and he is a very close friend and partner of the Metropolitan Program. Thank you so much.
No? Okay. 1, 2, 3. There we go. Okay, great. Welcome. Thanks very much, Bruce, for the great overview and all the work that you and Brookings have done. I think you've just in a very short period of time posed the kind of the challenge and the great opportunity and what's actually happened. And to help with that great overview of the facts, we thought it would be terrific to actually hear from the real practitioners and leaders who are driving business in this area. And it's an honor for me to introduce these three colleagues. We have Ron Armstrong from PACCAR. Again, when you think about it, we got trucks, drills, and power systems. I'm not doing justice. These are complex, broad places, but these are big trucks, drills, and power systems. So Ron's got the trucks, primarily on the West Coast, but other parts of the U.S. now. And I think the interesting thing, one of the many interesting things about PACCAR is they've been always effectively based in the U.S. They didn't go overseas. A lot of their competitors have been in Mexico, are in Mexico. They've stayed here. Why? What is it that's going on there? Extraordinarily profitable and successful. Everyone here is modest, but I just tell you, these are very successful companies and over time as we go through it. So we've on the truck side, Ron Armstrong. John from Stanley Black & Decker, again, very successful organization, I think 170 years old as an institution, has gone through many different transformations, and actually over the last few years has actually reshored some of the businesses. Maybe to Antoine's point, this is where the emerging market players are anxious and a bit jealous of the competitiveness, what's actually going on. So I think we're going to hear that vantage point. And then Eric Spiegel, who's the CEO of Siemens USA. Siemens, as you know, is a global player, a multinational, very well regarded in this whole area of advanced industries, but has made a real push in the US. They're a very significant player, and I think has a lot of interesting insights in terms of global comparisons as to what's happening, where are some of the shifts as it relates particularly to software. So that's the group. I'm going to talk as little as possible because we want to hear from the practitioners. I thought maybe we just start, and Ron, you could just a bit about PACCAR and just for the group to understand a little more about them, kind of your guys' philosophy of how you operate and so forth.
Well, PACCAR is beginning its 110th year, and we started truck manufacturing 70 years ago when we bought the Kenworth business. I think Bruce's comment about a computer on wheels is very pertinent to the truck of today. It's much more than just a lot of aluminum and iron and components to get products. The truck of today has evolved from maybe 2 control units to 40 control units on any given truck. We build 140,000 trucks each year, about half of those in the US, the other half around the world. And the requirements for our people to be able to design and make all those pieces work together to communicate is a very critical part of what our vehicles do for our customers. As the time we get to the end of next year, essentially every one of our trucks is going to be connected back to the fleet, back to the dealer, back to us, to get real-time information on how that truck is performing. And so as we've looked at our business, we have a lot of investment in skills and knowledge in our U.S. operations. Our primary U.S. locations are in Ohio and Texas. And we've been there for many years and are very productive. We have over 3,000 engineers and technicians in our company who really drive the development of our product and develop those over time. We obviously support our trucks through aftermarket parts distribution, and that too is becoming much more technologically advanced. A lot of e-commerce initiatives, a lot of connectivity between us, the suppliers, and our dealers. We also have a captive finance operation that again is being characterized by more and more technology being utilized in that business. So last year we had $19 billion in revenues, achieved about $1.4 billion in after-tax net income. We've earned a profit in a very volatile industry for 76 consecutive years, and so we're very proud of that, and we're looking forward to continuing to build our business, both not just in North America but around the world.
Well, thank you, Ron. John, to the Stanley Black & Decker, and again, it's much more than drills, but maybe just a little bit of an overview of the company and your guys' history.
Sure, Dom. Stanley Black & Decker sounds more like a Washington, D.C. law firm, but in fact, doesn't it? That was a negotiated corporate entity as part of what, in all seriousness, was a very successful merger of two well-established companies. Our brands, Stanley, Black & Decker, and DeWalt, are ubiquitous. About 50% of our revenues are comprised outside the U.S., and the company itself is the result of the merger of the Stanley Works and Black & Decker about almost over 4 years ago now. As I said, 50% of our revenues are outside the U.S. We have production around the world, but major production facilities on 4 continents. In general, we try to design in the market for the market, and I'm sure we'll come back to it later, but that was part of the drive in a significant reshoring activity that we've undertaken in the last couple of years. Beyond construction, do-it-yourself, professional products, and as everyone probably has a Stanley or a Black & Decker product in their house, or I hope you do, 2/3 of what we sell are actually to people who do it for a living. So it's fairly typical in terms of the 80-20 rule, where 20% of our end users would actually account for about 80% of our consumption. The overwhelming majority of the company is tools for, as I say, construction and industrial use, including supplying factories, OEM auto, and things of that nature, and just in addition to building. The only other point is what a lot of folks don't realize: about 25% of our revenue is derived from security, and I don't mean trading stocks, but commercial security. So installation, systems integration, and monitoring, primarily for commercial facilities. We're the second largest systems integrator in North America in that business, and that represents about 25% of our revenue.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Siemens, Eric.
Good. Thanks. So Siemens has been around for a long time. It's founded in 1847. I like to say it's the oldest, biggest company in the world. There are a few older companies, not many. There are a few bigger companies, but they're not as old as Siemens. And I think a lot of that is driven by the company's ability to innovate in many different areas, and also change itself over time. If I think about the business, we're in about 40 different businesses that cut across energy, both power generation, oil and gas sector, industrial automation, building technologies, healthcare, and also things like mobility and rail. So we're the world's leader in high-speed rail, we're the world's leader in offshore wind, we're the world's leader in MRs, and a whole variety of other technologies. And I think if you look back at the history of the company, it's really driven by this innovation and invention. In fact, I think Antoine mentioned that the U.S. has a monopoly on the pacemaker, and I think Siemens invented the pacemaker, or one of the first versions of the pacemaker. So and sold it later, maybe unfortunately. So the company is now really refocusing itself. Globally, we're about 350,000 employees, over 200 countries, over $100 billion in revenue. And the U.S. is the largest market with over 50,000 employees, and about 100 manufacturing facilities in the U.S., 25 of them which are large. And so we've acquired quite a few sites in the last years, and also built from scratch many different manufacturing sites. And the company is now refocusing its portfolio around electrification, automation, and digitalization. And so hopefully today we can talk a little bit about where we think some of those things are going in the industries, particularly in these advanced industries. So. Excellent.
Thanks. I hope that gives a good overview. These are, I think, truly representative of advanced industries and what's going on. One little other factoid I'd put out there, it's interesting again, and it wasn't by plan, all these companies are over 100 years old. One thing that goes through my mind, we've looked at the average lifetime of companies, and if you were an S&P 500 company in 1935, your average life would be 90 years. In 2012, it's 18. So most companies don't last. So McKinsey's coming up to 90, so I worry about that. But it's so there's to be able to thrive and survive in an environment like this, I think says something. So I think that's something else we should look at. I'm sure these companies have changed a lot over time. I'd like to focus first on, since 2010 or so, there seems to be a shift. If you think of the work that Bruce and Mark and Brookings have done, and you heard Antoine, there now seems to be more manufacturing that's coming back here. That there's more investment and so forth going. There's lots of challenges. I just want to focus a little bit on that at the start. When you think about site decisions, where you decide to manufacture, what's changed, if anything, in the last while? Maybe start with you, Ron.
Well, as we look at our business, there's a lot of key factors that drive us, but obviously labor cost is a key part, freight costs, but more importantly, the technology and the capability of the area to be able to support the engineering aspects of our products. Peterbilt, Kenworth, and DAF all have large engineering groups that are focused on making sure that our products are the best products in the marketplace, and Peterbilt and Kenworth and DAF all enjoy a premium positioning. So as we made the decision to build a new engine factory in 2007, we evaluated a lot of different options around the world and ultimately concluded to build the factory in Columbus, Mississippi. We could have built it in Mexico, we could have built it anywhere, but we really felt like that gave us the right proximity to suppliers, to talent, to a state that was very receptive to supporting business growth, as well as a right-to-work state that provides workplace flexibility. That's very key to our business because of the fact that we are in a very cyclical business, and having that flexibility with the workforce is key to our strategic planning and our decisions. So a lot of factors. The Mississippi State is just down the road from us, and they have a very well-developed automotive engineering capability. So finding all those ingredients and finding the mix of those that makes sense for our company, we felt like that.
So flexibility, the ecosystem, the support from
a very strong community college system that really was there to help train and develop the factory workers, and then also the university to be able to support the engineering higher level requirements.
Excellent. John, you've also just opened up some more
Sure.
plants.
Yeah. Bruce showed a slide, I think, that said it all. It was very simple. It said innovation, skills, and ecosystems. And that's what it's all about. And public-private partnerships are very important. Ron just touched on it in terms of the local community colleges, many of whom will actually design a curriculum to train your people if in return you'll say, hey, we will interview at least 20 of your graduates and hire 5 to 10 every year. Those kinds of things all make sense. Notice no one said subsidies, interestingly. And while they help, and obviously cooperation from local governments is terrific, I spent 14 years of my very long professional career living and working abroad. And if nothing else, I realized subsidies exist for a reason. Without them, you wouldn't locate there. It's what a government has to do. And I see my friend from Siemens nodding, it's that simple. But in terms of the innovation, it's obviously it's our lifeblood. In terms of the skills, we've talked about the need for collaboration with local institutions, STEM education. I won't steal Eric's thunder. He does wonderful work with a task force that he's the vice chair of for the Business Roundtable, and there's a lot of work going on. But then the ecosystems, and that leads to just very quickly why we reshored a major production effort. Stanley, like so many others in the late 80s, early 90s, where labor was a factor, offshored much production. The more labor intensive, the quicker we moved to China with great success. And that included, in the case of Black & Decker, both consumer or retail and professional power tools. There hasn't been a power tool, cordless power tool, made in the U.S. probably in 25 years. A lot of electric components, overwhelmingly made in China, usually in wholly owned factories that you control the IP and things of that nature. But about 2.5 years ago, for a variety of reasons, rising labor costs that we've talked about in quote, low-cost countries, currency, length of supply chain, we did a study, and the end result of that is we moved production for DeWalt Power Tools, a professional brand, not all of it, but a significant portion, from Suzhou, China, and Mexico to Fort Mill, South Carolina. It's actually North Carolina. The plant is literally right on the border of North and South Carolina, so we got great collaboration, cooperation, both from Governor Quarry and Governor Haley, which was helpful. But it was simply about the fact local component suppliers were there, a skilled workforce was already there. It was the site of a large North American distribution center, dramatically shortened the supply chain, on average 6+ weeks, 6 to 12 weeks of product on the water if it's coming from China. Something like a West Coast port strike tends to slow getting those Father's Day presents or construction materials to the home centers for their customers and end users. So a whole lot of factors went into it. And in terms of cost, we've been public with this, Dom, so I'm quite comfortably saying it. Within the first year of operation, we had the cost of that power tool within 5% of what we were delivered to the customer, of course, of what we were able to do it in China. We think over time, as we ramp up production, get a little more scale, we'll have it at parity. And that doesn't count the benefit of 10 working capital turns versus 4 or 5, which I don't need to explain to anybody in this room is incredibly valuable, and just a much more simplified and shortened supply chain. So it's been a great success. Lastly, I won't wave the stars and stripes. We knew this was a good thing. What we didn't realize is the strength and incredible support from our customers and end users when we introduced the first U.S.-made professional power tool in 25 years in the U.S. It's been a phenomenal success from a marketing or a customer perception point of view. We knew it was a good thing to do. We quite frankly underestimated the positive impact that would have. It makes sense for us to continue to look at more opportunities like that.
Very interesting. It's quite encouraging too when you think about it as well. You don't just move a plant every other year once you've locked it. These are big decisions, obviously. I mean, what is the time frame?
Well, the eco, it's particularly and Eric's involved in much more, I'll say, sophisticated processes. But these ecosystems, right now we talk about weak foreign currencies, and you just can't, to your point, Dom, we can't move it overnight. You can increase production 10 or 15% in a low-cost country, but when you're selling professional products or really sophisticated products with lifetime warranties or life and death, if the product fails, to qualify a component supplier, being a good example, could take 18 to 36 months. So these are not decisions that you decide on Friday you're gonna move production on Monday. You can ramp up a little bit, ramp down a little bit, but these are decisions that you're gonna live with for a while.
Yeah, and having that flexibility and
yes.
So agility is key. So Eric, Siemens.
No, I think a lot of the good points have been made. I would maybe just add a couple things. One is, I think obviously what's happened over the last few years with the access to relatively inexpensive energy here and shifting labor rates, the U.S. being more competitive, the U.S. Workforce in general is very productive, and what's happened with labor rates in a lot of the emerging economies has really improved the table stakes for the U.S. in terms of being a place to invest. But I think those aren't the most important things we look at. Certainly there are things we look at because you have to be competitive. I would say the bigger things that we mentioned here, one is around innovation. And I think what a lot of companies found in the U.S. and have found around the globe is that if the manufacturing goes offshore, the innovation goes with it. We co-locate, almost all of our manufacturing facilities have research and development and innovation, ongoing engineering design, ongoing at the plants. The second thing with that is also to be in close proximity to the customers, because that's where you really get a feel for what needs to change in order to be competitive. The more you separate those things, if you're separating R&D from manufacturing from the customers, now you've got to connect all those dots in a way and also be fast to market. And so just being low cost for a lot of the technologies we make is not enough. You have to be low cost, but you also have to be innovative. You have to be understanding the customer's challenges, and you have to be driving that in a real way. I would say the second thing is, the U.S. Has the best university system in the world, so you have access to world-class talent at the university level doing research, also the national labs. We do quite a bit with the national labs here. So you have access to some of the best talent in the world. Also, just the innovation culture in this country is something that we at Siemens are trying to adapt. We're actually opening a new corporate technology center out, and it's in Princeton today. We do over $1 billion of R&D in the U.S. today. Our main facility is in Princeton, but we have it located in a lot of the plants. But we're going to be opening one in Silicon Valley here very soon, just because we want to sop up some of what's going on out there in a much bigger way. So those things are all important to the process. But I would say being faster to market, being closer to customers, having access to world-class talent. And I should say on the other side of that, where we have had some issues here is one around what I would call skilled labor and the middle skills, which we can talk about more, has been an issue, and some stories about opening some large new plants where we've needed hundreds of new employees, and the struggles to find the skilled labor to work in plants now that are largely run by lasers, robots, computers, et cetera. Just don't have the people that are trained for that. And the other thing is infrastructure in this country. The infrastructure problem is real. We've built 4 large plants in the last few years, and in every one of those, we either had to upgrade roads or rail spurs or whatever in order to be able to move supply chain in and out, and also to be able to export. And those are things that a lot of companies were thinking about maybe locating assets here, maybe wouldn't be able to afford, or maybe they're not moving into a big enough market. Yeah. And we got very little support from anyone for those upgrades. Some support from some states and things like that, but in many cases we had to do a lot of the upgrades on our own. And so this issue about infrastructure is a real issue. A lot of those transportation assets in this country and other assets are really run down. So, I think it used to be 20, 30 years ago, people thought of the U.S. as having, maybe the best, most sophisticated infrastructure. Yeah. That's just not true anymore. So
very interesting. I'd like to sort of continue on that theme on improvement opportunity. If you could wave a magic wand in a sense of what you'd like to see more of, or what would make it easier in order to be able to do it. I also want to make sure too. We're opening it up for questions too for 10 or 15 minutes. So please be prepared to ask any questions or send them in, and we'll make sure we cover them. But maybe just picking up on Eric's thing, John, just any, as you sort of, Eric mentioned infrastructure and the need to ensure that that's upgraded. I don't know if is it skills or
well, sure. It's kind of hard to expand infrastructure for obvious reasons for all of us, not just the country. And I was talking with some of the Brookings staff earlier, where you see Tom Donahue, who's the CEO of the U.S. Chamber, and then the head of the AFL-CIO in violent agreement on the need to upgrade infrastructure. That doesn't happen very often. Yeah. And as a consequence, it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, and it probably needs to be addressed. For us, and Eric touched on it, it's the skills gap. Yeah. As I mentioned, Eric's doing yeoman's work. I'm not his PR agent, by the way. We're good friends. We're not competitors. He gives a lot of his time and his company's time and his resources to a workforce readiness program on behalf of the Business Roundtable. It's why I mention it. I do the same at the NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, and it is the skills gap. As recently as a year and a half ago, there were 600,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs in the U.S. And we can call it advanced manufacturing because, as Eric pointed out, the image of manufacturing, of dirty overalls and a missing finger and grease under your fingernails and your name on your shirt, that's not a modern manufacturing plant anymore. It's an engineer and a laptop and basic skills. And these are high-paying jobs. Yeah. These are $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year jobs, as Bruce's data pointed out. And there are a lot of sources, in terms of what and sources for this labor, but local collaboration, I think, in our case, some of the greatest institutions of the world where the Nobel laureates and folks are coming from, that's great, but their demand exceeds supply for these brilliant minds. But what we have found in terms of an opportunity, Tom, is by, as I touched on it earlier, by partnering with the local, I'll say lesser known community colleges, but where most of these kids are the first, often ethnically diverse, which is terrific. They're often the first young man or young woman in their family who's gone past high school. The local community college, in our case, we have large population bases in Connecticut, in Indianapolis, in or around Baltimore. They will truly design a curriculum that trains your people, at least to give them the basic skills where when they show up on the job, you custom train them for that. So 80% of the work's done. The reward is, of course, their graduates have gainful employment. It's win-win. You can classify that as public-private or just leveraging the system. But I think clearly that's the biggest opportunity.
Middle skills.
Yes, sir.
Get community colleges more integrated with the needs of what
Absolutely.
employers want. Yeah, that's an amazing number.
And the image,
600,000.
and I have to say, just to put my NAM hat on for a minute, it's just the image of the manufacturing industry, advanced manufacturing in particular, needs a facelift. It needs an image consultant. Many women are in these jobs, and they're doing phenomenally well. It's a huge, it's a noticeable change. But you get the, hey, that's great for my neighbor's kid, but my kid's not going to go to a Votech school and work in a factory. Well, a lot of folks sitting in the C-suite, that's where they started their careers. But the point is, these aren't dangerous jobs anymore, and these aren't physically stressful jobs anymore. These are jobs that require some fundamental technical skills that not enough of our high school or 2-year or 4-year graduates have.
Yeah, and we heard, I think, just building on that, all of the sort of the software needs and services, and you said technology in every single one of these organizations. Ron, any views on where the gaps or areas to?
Well, I think in our industry, one of the challenges is the transportation system, the highway system. We can make our vehicles as efficient as we can, but as you enter into metropolitan areas, there is a high degree of congestion, and the quality of the highway system and the road system, I think, is in need of repair. And so I think it's critical that we make the investment in the highway infrastructure and the road infrastructure to really get the efficiency out of the whole freight movement process. So I see that as share the thoughts about the employment, but in terms of our industry, the investment in the highway system is critical.
Yeah. It seems too, the other thing I'd say that it's very much local. It's the way you guys have described where it's in the Carolinas, or you're talking about, again, it's the cities. It's what is that? That's where the action isn't sort of a national government. You just don't. This is really is it mayors and governors, or has that changed over time, or has it always been that way?
When we made the decision to locate our factory in Columbus, Mississippi, the governor at the time was Haley Barbour, and he was a very strong proponent of engaging business development for the state. So I think it's critical to have. We had Governor Barbour, we had all the local officials were anxious for the jobs. They're anxious for the opportunity to get that higher level job in the community. It meant a lot to them, and they worked really well in concert to put the package together that made sense.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with what Ron said. It's, to me, far more of a state and local issue. The CEO of the state, and that's the governor, in every case. Governor Barbour, I talked about, Governor McCrory, Governor Haley, just the folks that understand it's a great opportunity for their state to create jobs, to create revenue. And again, it's not about subsidies. It's just about, what do you need us to do? What barriers do we need to remove? Recognizing we have responsibilities to the community, to the environment, et cetera. How can we work with you? And that's just really important, and that's why I think you see particularly advanced manufacturing jobs locating in 4 or 5 areas where the collaboration, the need is there, and the collaboration's there. That's to me the most important driver.
And Eric, just again with the global overview, and Bruce showed some slides about which other countries are there. What if we think about, in a sense, our competition on that side, which countries around the world seem to be moving well in this area as well too? I saw Korea was on the, I don't know, but just from your sense of it.
Well, I think a lot of just in terms of innovation and in terms of advanced industries.
Where advanced industries are sort of also growing.
I think obviously a lot of the emerging economies, China certainly, and some of the Asian countries, but also some of the European countries, Germany. I think we were chatting before, Germany coming out with this new phrase, Industry 4.0, which is really going to be moving, it's really talking about moving companies to the digital enterprise with digital design and digital manufacturing, and bringing those two things together to really drive efficiency, time to market, and flexibility. And so it's sort of the fourth phase in the Industrial Revolution. Now, not many companies are there right now, but there's some industries that are moving that way very quickly. We would say the auto industry is probably the fastest moving toward that. The idea, for example, with the Ford F-150, you can literally make millions of versions of the same F-150 coming off the same line. And it's the software that really allows you to do that. And so you're going to see that now more and more. In the old days, they would say with mass production, I can make it cheap, but I can only make 1 or 2 or 3 kinds. Now you're moving toward mass customization, where I'm going to be able to make thousands of variations, have incredible flexibility to meet market demands at pretty much the same cost. And so there's no longer going to be the big trade-off between cost and flexibility. And that's really this Industry 4.0. So Germany's pushing that in a big way. I think a lot of our customers here are looking very hard at that. We're working with a lot of companies, and that's really a software driven. I mean, everything we make, everything you see in the factories now, software is playing a much bigger role. Everything is being censored. And it's not just about the products, design and manufacturing, but also the design of the plants themselves and integrating those things to improve productivity. So that's going to drive a step change along all those dimensions I talked about. And this is the next big wave that we think is going to change advanced industries over the next few years, right?
So the software, we'll hear more in the next panel from James.
Right. Eric, at the risk of doing Dom's job, but real quickly, Bruce mentioned it. I think there may not be the understanding of, spend a second on the German apprentice system for technical skills, because I quite frankly, I learned about it from sitting on your task force at the BRT. And it's, to me, an incredible system that I think is too often overlooked, if you'd excuse me.
So just Germany's had a dual education system for many years, an apprentice program. At Siemens, for example, in Germany alone, we have 10,000 apprentices. And the idea just basically is, out of high school, you get hired into an apprentice program. In Germany, there are over 300 different apprentice programs, not all of them related to manufacturing. I mean, a lot of other skills in the medical field and culinary arts and all kinds of other things. And those apprenticeships change over time. They add new ones, and they get rid of ones that are no longer viable. But you basically work part-time for a company in a facility, so you actually develop the skills, and you go to school part-time. And the program's left. In the U.S., we've started one at Charlotte at our gas turbine facility with a community college there. They go to school part-time, they work part-time, we pay them. They start out slightly above minimum wage, and they end up, when they're ready to start full-time after 3 years, they make $55,000, $60,000. So it's a great story. So you have, the deal is you develop a real skill, you get a certificate, in that case from the state of North Carolina. You have a job, guaranteed if you pass the courses. It's a high-paying job, and you have no debt, which, as we know, in a lot of our education system, you graduate, you have a degree, but maybe you can't find a job in the area that you have a degree. You maybe don't have a real skill that someone can hire you into. You have to be apprenticed wherever you get hired, and you don't have any debt. And a lot of this is in the middle skills. So we've started these things, and actually working with the President's Council on Advanced Manufacturing, Klaus Kleinfeld. I don't know if Klaus is here yet, but Alcoa, Dow, and some other companies were involved. We're starting some more apprentice programs around the country, seeding that in different areas, and hoping that once you build these programs, they will come. For example, in Charlotte, there are now 7 or 8 other companies who are part of the apprentice program in the same program called mechatronics. But there are many different areas you can apprentice people. And so this is a way, I think it's also a good avenue for building the next middle class, right? Because you have a job. And in Germany, they don't see it as the end of your career. They see it as the beginning of your career. Exactly. You can continue going to school. A lot of the senior executives at Siemens were apprentices when they started their careers, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's back to your PR point, I think, John, and that they're very well respected jobs. It isn't, as John, you said, well, you don't want your child to go there because it's seen as somewhat lesser thing. It's actually a very good thing. And you know, you see some of the executives at BMW and others, these are former apprentices. And I think that's a mindset shift, as you said, we need to get. I'd love to actually open it up to get any questions from the group. And if we could try not to have speeches, but just to get to the question, I would love it. Or otherwise, I'll jump in over here.
Hi, David Wu, former member of Congress, and since we're in Washington, I'm going to ask a policy question rather than a business question. I was taking a vacation in Costa Rica. There are 4 Swiss in the class. One was an investment banker, one worked on jet engines, and 2 repaired bicycles. And the 2 bicycle repair people were so focused. I mean, it was really, really impressive. So the comparison is Europe versus the United States. And in Europe, if you graduate from secondary school, the education beyond that is very low cost, if not free. So if you don't know exactly what you're going to do, you can wander around for a few years in that training education system before you decide or find something. In the US, it's not publicly paid for, and it's very expensive, and a lot of people drop out or never go. How important is it, if important at all, for this country to better publicly fund that beyond secondary education? Would there be a positive return on investment?
You want to handle that?
I can maybe just give one part of the answer because, as I said, I was on the BRT work task force, and as well as the President's Advanced Manufacturing Council. I think one of the most important issues is there are a lot of programs which provide aid today in the U.S. There are federal programs, there are some state programs, et cetera. I think the biggest issue is making them more business driven. For example, the apprentice program I talked about in Charlotte, there are real jobs at the end. You're basically putting people in a training program, and if they go through the process, they're going to get a job, and you know there are jobs there. One of the things I would say is not just to have people continuing to get education, but to get it more focused and more aligned with where are the jobs. I think there's a big disconnect in this country, not only in coming out of high school. The high school system, I think, needs to get more aligned with where the jobs are and start educating young people about where the opportunities are really going to be. I think the community colleges need to get more aligned. We found the community college is very receptive, and the university system needs to get more aligned with where the jobs are. In some areas they do, but in other areas they're not very receptive. We opened this, I talked about Charlotte, this gas turbine plant. We went to work with the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, to develop an engineering program around gas turbines and energy because one didn't exist in the area. So it's at all levels, and I think if the federal government and the states were going to direct money to things, I would direct them at things where businesses are saying there are jobs there. I think to me that's the key part, not just it could all be free, but can you direct it at jobs? That's a
600,000 phenomenon.
And just very little to add because there are lots of questions, but respectfully disagree with that there's nothing there. Agreed. I think the mistake in the image is that young man or woman who goes to 4 years of whatever private liberal arts, whatever school, has $200,000 in debt, or they've spent that, can't get a job. I referenced the community colleges, as Eric did. In our particular case, Central Connecticut State College, Towson State University, near our facilities where we hire a lot of people. Little to no cost to the student, overwhelming majority live at home and commute. Custom designed curriculum that would allow them to at least be interviewed, if not hired, at one of our facilities. So they exist, but certainly nowhere near enough. But to suggest there's nothing there, I think is an overstatement. To suggest that there's not a problem would also be naive. So point taken.
Just one other thought, and I think free is probably too cheap. I think those students having skin in the game makes them
absolutely
more focused.
Ron, you couldn't be more correct.
And dedicated student, and when they got skin in the game, they'll focus and work harder.
I'm going to take a couple of questions, and then we'll divvy them up as we go through. Over here.
Thanks. Charles Wessner with the Georgetown University.
You have a mic there for you.
Really very interesting here, the case studies that you're describing, and particularly the use of the German model. But just 2 quick points, and one with a smile. It's sometimes a little interesting to hear businessmen talk about the importance of investing in R&D and the importance in investing in ecosystems, the importance in investing in infrastructure. And so I assume NAM is going to push hard for higher taxes to fund these things. Just a question.
I think
well, it comes from somewhere, doesn't
Sure.
it? And the second question, I was really, and I mean this, pleasantly surprised to hear how much you're already doing with the community colleges. But I think the idea that the federal government is going to fix that may be misplaced. And the question I would ask you, Eric, is for example, can you extend the good things that you're doing across, I think you mentioned 25 manufacturing facilities. This country, as de Tocqueville pointed out, has often been built from the bottom up. And I think your individual initiatives to do that training and collaboration with the community colleges. The MIT study argued that actually you can fill these jobs there's some question about how much the gap is. There's very clearly the gap in the type of specialized training that you're talking about, but that's not going to come from a federal program, I would argue, but what you do.
Right. Take 2 more, and then I think we'll wrap it around. Down here.
And when I'm a retired CEO in Virginia, and I'm working with the senior business people to diversify the economy in Virginia. On the 600,000 jobs, it's not intuitive to me why that isn't being addressed in a different way. Does it mean that you are foregoing revenue that exists because those jobs do not exist, in which event there would be an ROI if you did certain things to address that? So it's not 100% intuitive to me that those jobs are real. So can you explain that a little bit more? And then secondly, we've tried on 2 or 3 occasions to create apprentice programs and go to employers in the region and say, okay, we'll fund a lot of this. They need skin in the game too, of course, or, it's not real. And we say, will you commit to an outtake? And of course you go through economic cycles and you can't do but so much. But can you address that with a little more particularity, because it's not intuitive to us as we deal with it? In other words, if there really was a return on investment for you, you'd hire those people, you'd develop your own programs, and you wouldn't forego revenue.
Okay. And one last one here.
Hi, Esther Lee. I created and led the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship in the Obama administration. I worked at Siemens as well. Expedia was an idea started by a Microsoft employee that was funded by Microsoft, and which later spun off. What are the kinds of things that your companies are doing to encourage entrepreneurship within your companies? And maybe you could, and if not, maybe outside your companies as well.
Right. And Antoine, you want to make a comment? Then I think we'll then we'll stop. We won't answer the questions. We'll just. Go ahead.
You briefly touched on the tax and tax incentives, subsidy issue. But my question is really, how often is that the clincher in your experience?
Good.
So which one?
Well, Eric,
Where do you want to start?
Why don't we start with the 600,000?
Yeah, let
ROI?
me. The 600,000, let me start with, those aren't jobs at Stanley Black & Decker, though. I run Stanley Black & Decker. I don't run the United States of America. Just to be clear, we're a really small piece. But your points are well taken. First of all, I was trying to be politically correct. Half the people that apply for those jobs don't pass a background test, criminal record, or substance abuse. So half the applicants are ruled out, even if they were to have the technical skills. That's sad, but that's the state of the world that we live in today. In terms of the jobs themselves, you're absolutely right. But the view is if you're indebted to or answer to your shareholders, you have to be met halfway. Yes, we could completely train at great expense, or you can do the kind of programs that at least I know we as a company are doing, working with the local schools, community colleges. Bring me somebody with the basic skills, either coming out of the military or a basic STEM education, so we're not starting completely from scratch, and then we can train them to do these $60,000 to $90,000 a year jobs with specific skills that are required to make power tools or make components for the automotive industry. I suspect the same thing would apply to PACCAR and Siemens, but I won't speak for them. So the whole idea is if just someone walking off the street, there's a very long, if you will, training period before you're going to get a return on investment, your words, on that employee. Bring me someone with the basic skills. I can get him there in 6 months instead of 3 years. That's the person I'm looking for. But those jobs remain open. As I say, it's half of it is simply those applicants can't pass the background check for the companies that require them, and half of it is clearly still lack of the STEM skills.
Maybe just a real quickie to that. It's a really good question. I mean, actually, that is why we developed our apprentice program with the community college, because we couldn't find people. It took us, and so we put a training program together to train hundreds of people for over a year to be able to fill the jobs as playing, because we couldn't find them in the marketplace. So that's why we worked with the community college. We put a curriculum together. We flew people to Berlin to train them. It was very, very expensive, but there was an ROI. The second thing I would say is what we're finding is that these STEM jobs and these kind of middle skill jobs, I don't mean PhDs, I mean people who can, the time to fill those jobs is much longer than other jobs. So instead of 30, 40 days, it might be 60 days, 70 days, or whatever. So eventually you might find someone, or you put them into a training program. Some of these things can be a 3-month training program, and you can do that. So we do that on a regular basis. Yeah.
And just while there was a couple of questions around the community colleges extending that. Is that that's done more locally?
Yeah, so someone asked about, so we do have a relationship with about 30 or 40 community colleges, and they are mostly around the 25 large facilities we have. We have now started formal apprentice programs at several of those, in Sacramento and Atlanta and in Alabama, and also in Charlotte. The issue is, one of the issues, I'll just be blunt, is that it is quite expensive here relative to the cost of doing it in a place like Germany. One of the issues is that, as I said, we pay them while they're going to school and while they work, and also to develop the training and whatever equipment is needed for the training. In Germany, the federal government picks up a part of that, and the state government picks up a part of that. That doesn't exist here today. Now the federal government has come out with a $100 million program, which is an interesting start. But there really isn't money dedicated. Where in Germany, it's a whole process, right? And the apprentice thing. So there's no structure for it here. But yes, we are trying to find a way to scale that. And there are many other companies who are looking for ways to participate and scale it. So, I think support from things like the national governors or the state governors, and it will be nice. But I think, again, this is going to be mostly business driven, I think.
Good. We got 2 more answers.
There was one on tax that I think just very, very quickly, without opening a political can of worms, just an important point. I think that BRT, NAM, and a lot of other folks would stand united on. We talk about comprehensive tax reform, territorial tax systems. Everybody understands it. You can't address corporate tax without addressing individual tax. I think there'd be agreement or consensus there. But I think mostly important from the manufacturing perspective, 70% of manufacturers in the U.S. file taxes as individuals or subchapter S. They're not Siemens, they're not Stanley Black & Decker, they're not PACCAR. These are the folks that create the jobs, the 10, 12, 15, 20, 40 person startup that ultimately becomes Siemens or PACCAR or whatever. 70% of the manufacturers in the U.S. file as individuals or as subchapter S. And I think that's a fact that's kind of often lost on legislators, or when the tax question is raised. Doesn't solve it, but I think it's just an awareness that the folks in the room should have.
Yeah, good. On the spin-offs or the entrepreneurship, the question that was asked. Any comments on that?
You know, we've devoted actual innovation space in each of our locations to help people come together with some interesting designs, some places that are out of the box, that people really focus on human-centered design of how people use our products, and allow them the chance to just be creative and put together paper prototypes. And so we really encourage that, because to keep that competitive advantage, you've got to create that kind of an opportunity for the technologies, the engineers, our factory workers, all use those spaces to keep moving our company forward.
So it's not just the big R&D money; it's the employees actually are involved in. Yeah, fantastic. I think we're running out of time here, so I would love it if you'd all join me in thanking the panelists here, Ron, John, and Eric, for a terrific session. Really appreciate it. We're, without a break, going to do a switch over here. My colleague Srikant, who leads our advanced industry practice, will come up and lead the next panel and introduce people. Thanks, guys.
Treatment of any disease. That's what I've.
That's fine. I think the simple thing is a new technology to treat and cure genetic diseases.
Okay. Good. Ready? I think there are a few more people who are trying to come. So. I'm gonna. Okay. I think one key lesson for me after last pan. said to move some things around. Yeah. No, I just fucking. Hopefully we can all get started so that we can move right into the second panel as well. It's tough to get started when people are... Great, looks like everyone is settling in, so we'll get started. As Antoine mentioned, I was telling him during his introduction when he basically, before the first panel, majority of his talk was all around the technologies that go into the advanced industries portion. So he made it a lot easier for us in the second panel to start the introduction, right? So when we as McKinsey look at what are the technologies that will fundamentally reshape the global competitiveness in this? There are like a dozen technologies. And we are quite fortunate. We have 3 leaders who basically, Klaus will hopefully join quite soon, 3 companies who are leaders in their field, and leaders not just in United States, but globally, and who just happen to be in US, right? And we are basically have an opportunity to talk to them. We have Jim Heppelman. Jim is the CEO of PTC. He is which is a company which is a leader, which is reinventing itself and being a leader in Internet of Things. And his recent HBR article, in fact, has laid the foundation on what Internet of Things could be in advanced industries. Right? He has fundamentally reshaped in terms of through this article what it could be. And we have Katrina Bosley, who is the CEO of Editas. Basically, they're trying to reinvent using genetics to cure almost any disease, right? So basically we'll have an interesting perspective. And Klaus Kleinfeld, who'll join us quite soon due to travel schedule. He's the CEO of Alcoa, and he's looking at how do you actually reinvent from fundamental building blocks through materials, right? So these 3 folks, we are quite fortunate who are leaders in their space, join us for the panel. Jim, if you could quickly just give us a brief intro.
Yeah. So PTC is a software company based in Boston, sort of T-shirt sizes. We'd be a large, not quite an extra large, but not a medium. We were founded 30 years ago. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary. So 30 years ago, there was a Russian-born mathematician who had an idea to do 3-dimensional modeling of things. And that's the 3D in 3D printers. So somebody has to come up with the 3D shape, and then the printer produces it. So he pioneered that idea with a fairly famous product in the industrial world called ProEngineer 30 years ago. And for the next 10 years, I mean, the company had explosive growth because this allowed mechanical engineers to design in 3 dimensions a component on the computer screen, and then design all the other components and make sure they fit together, and then simulate how they'd work, and maybe you'd find some problems and you'd change the design a little bit. And then finally, you'd turn the factory loose, but by the time you started up the factory, you had a design that you were pretty confident in. So it was, huge savings in prototyping and time to market and quality and so forth. What happened is over the next 10 years, the world changed and products changed, and we began to see, what Mark Andreessen was talking about when he said software is eating the world. That software is showing up everywhere. It's in refrigerators, it's in trucks, it's in drills, it's in planes, trains, and automobiles. It's wind turbines, you name it. And that the actual engineering of these things was kind of rebalancing around a mix of hardware and software. So we at PTC reacted to this phenomenon, and we expanded into software tools that would help software engineers build the digital half of that product next to the mechanical engineers that were building the physical half of that product, and then it would all come together and be a great product. The next thing that happened is we also realized that business models were changing and that people weren't thinking about just selling things, a transaction one and done. They wanted to sell something and then hang around and provide value-added services, accessories, spare parts, technician services. Maybe bundle some of that up into a contract like a warranty or a performance-based contract. And then taken to the fullest extent, they might say, I don't even want to sell the thing, I just want to charge for use of it. And that led us into a new kind of software for optimizing the servicing of things. So at that point, we were helping companies create things, engineering and manufacturing, and we were helping companies service things. And so along comes this idea of the Internet of Things. And if you think that all these products are becoming computers, as we heard in the previous panel, that leads you to what Scott McNealy, the founder of Sun, had said some time ago, which is the network is the computer. And by that he meant when computers work together, they can accomplish far more than when they work independently. So now you get the idea that these products, these computer products are coming online, these refrigerators and trucks and so forth, and that gives you all kinds of new capabilities to control them and optimize them and give them autonomy and then let them work together in systems. Share a common database. If you think about how Apple's iPad, iPod, iPhone, iMac all share a common database called iTunes and a common app store, and to the point where if you buy one of them, you actually want to buy all of them because they work together so well. So that idea is spreading over to John Deere, who wants harvesting equipment to inform a database in the sky that then informs tillage equipment, which informs planting and fertilizing equipment, which informs irrigation equipment and so forth. So, we really realized that this Internet of Things would radically transform the way that products are created, operated, and serviced. And so then we expanded into that business, and that's really what led to the HBR article, was Professor Michael Porter and I spending some time thinking about what does this mean? Is it just a new feature set, or is it a deeper, more fundamental competitive transformation? And in that research and in the article that we published, we concluded that this will definitely affect value chains and the motions that companies go through as they create, operate, and service products. It will change the dynamics in an industry. The so-called Porter's Five Forces actually change pretty radically. It will actually redefine the boundaries of industries. The Apple example, where suddenly a decision for a music device is also a decision for a phone and a computer and a laptop and tablet and so forth. So, we think it's a pretty big thing, and that's become really a transformative moment for our company to think about, a new type of product and product system out there and how to enable our customers to do that.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jim. Katrine, do you want to?
Sure. So Editas Medicine may well represent the opposite end of every spectrum of everybody who's on all these panels. Just to give you a little context, we are 15 months old. We have 29 employees, but somebody else is starting next week, so we're almost up to 30. And we do genome editing, which is fixing broken genes that drive genetic disease. It is out there. When I first heard about it, it sounded like science fiction to me. And the more I dug in, the more amazing it seemed, because it's not science fiction. It's actually the beginning toehold of something that's been a vision for a very long time. Probably since, with Watson and Crick, we understood the structure of DNA. We began to understand that the wrong sequence of DNA could cause disease. Gee, wouldn't it be nice to fix it there instead of just treating the symptoms down the road? So that idea has been around for a very, very long time. You might imagine being able to actually do that's a little bit tricky. Now, there are certain technologies that have been around for a few years that have made some progress on this, but in around 2012, there were a number of scientific publications on a technology, CRISPR-Cas9. It's scientific jargon, I realize that, but that's the terminology that scientists name things in crazy ways sometimes. And this technology has exploded onto the scene scientifically because it's actually able to achieve this thing that was in people's vision for so long. just to put in a plug for funding basic research really matters. The original work that kind of led to all these observations was about 15, 20 years ago, people who were studying the genes of bacteria. They were sequencing them, they were looking at patterns. Clearly, a very basic inquiry. And as that was chased through just people who were really interested in the genes of bacteria and how they're structured and how they work, they noticed these patterns, they chased it, what does it mean, how does it work? They discovered this tool that a bacteria uses to modify its own DNA. And they said, you know what, actually, we could sort of co-opt that, repurpose it, and use it to modify human DNA where you have a broken gene that's causing a disease. And it sounds kind of crazy. Most things in my world, when you first hear about them, if it doesn't sound crazy, it's probably not ambitious enough. This definitely fits that category. The thing is, it actually works. And some of you may have seen, I think it was a year or so ago, Andy Pollack in the New York Times did a wonderful overview article on this technology, because even though it was so young and really just being pursued in academic laboratories, you could see the potential of where this would go, realizing this promise of treating genetic diseases at their root instead of just after they've taken hold. So, as I said, we're a very young company. We're translating this technology from academic science into the kind of science you can apply in patients, and to ask a patient to be an experimental subject in a clinical trial, because that's how you develop drugs, is people have to volunteer to be experimented upon. And to try to then take that forward and really turn it into an approvable medicine. And that's why we exist. We're in the beginning of that journey.
Oh, thank you. So I think just to bring Klaus, since he was able to get here just in time for his introduction. So we have gone through the digital portion of it from Jim, we have gone through the genes portion of it, and now we are trying to get to the atoms or the basic materials portion of it from Klaus.
And what was the question?
So Klaus, if you could just introduce yourself and talk about some new cool technologies that you guys are working at.
How much time do we have? Right. So Klaus Kleinfeld, I run Alcoa. And in terms of, obviously, in terms of digitization, it affects everybody. I guess you've talked a little bit about that, and probably have a little time on that. But also on the material science side, there's so much happening, on the material side, on the process side. On the material side, for instance, if you just look at what we announced last year, in the aerospace side, we announced a new generation of aluminum lithium. And aluminum lithium, a metal that allows for structural solutions on aeroplanes that are 10% lighter than composite materials. Where you would have said, oh, is that possible? How is that doable? Right? And obviously this requires a very different type of manufacturing process, right? One example, then end of last year we announced the micromill technology enabled new materials for automotive. And everybody has a car, so you all kind of know the deal. Usually if you looked into cars and what the option the car designer had, is that if they wanted less weight, they got less strength, right? And less formability. So this was really and usually also worse surface qualities, right? So this was basically the formula that was around all the time, and everybody knew it. So we announced end of last year that we now have new materials out there that we are bringing out there, and that are already getting tested by some automotive firms, that basically bring the weight substantially down 30-40%, increase the formability 30-40%, and increase the strength at the same time also 30-40%, plus have surface quality that is even in line with the highest standards that the automotive industry has for outer surfaces. And you say, holy cow, how is that possible, right? And it's only possible because to make this, we had to invent a new process of making this material, and which we labeled micromill. And the micromill is a process where you go from hot metal to a rolled coil in 20 minutes, something that today, all around the world, even for the best ones, takes 20 days. right? And with this, and it takes about the reduction of the footprint brings it down to 25% of the footprint of what you usually have, and the energy, we believe the energy consumption will go down by 50%. So you have an unbelievably crazy thing there. Now, and what enables this is the question, why was nobody able to invent that before? This is where all the sensing comes in, right? Because when you go from hot metal to rolled coil, you have to really know at any point in the process exactly what is going on and respond to this, right? And that's also where new materials on how you make rolls come into the game, when new surface qualities come into the game, where you basically use certain lubricants, you know, to make sure that the material doesn't stick. That's another one. Another cool thing, I mean, we acquired a company called Firth Rixson last year, and one of the reasons why we acquired it is because they have a technology that's called isothermal forging. I mean, isothermal forging, as the word says, I mean, it's iso, basically having the same temperature, and it forges, in this case, it forges nickel superalloys. And the reason why it does that is because it's mostly for application in jet engines. And jet engines or industrial gas turbines, it's all about the temperature in the combustion chamber. So in the last, we are number one when it comes to blades in this. But what we didn't have, the bottleneck was what the blade sits on, which is called the disc, right? Because the disc couldn't stand the temperature. So the great engineers invented a technology where the die gets heated up to almost the same temperature than the material and then gets forged. But to do that at the temperature, you want to go to the maximum temperature, you do that in a vacuum, right? So now imagine a forging press of, let's say, 25,000 tons. Operating in a vacuum where the temperature of the die and the temperature of the material is almost at a melting point, right? And it doesn't stick together. And that allows, and so that alone is an engineering monster, you know. You have to basically build it all robotic. You could not have done that before because it needs total robotization, you know. It's a really amazing piece, and it allows for a 70 Celsius, that is, you know, that's the temperature that the world thinks in, you know. So Celsius, 70 degrees increase of temperature inside of the combustion chamber, and that alone allows the total efficiency of the jet engine to go up by 4%, and that's big, 4%. Gigantic. So those is stuff, and you want me to? No. Have you had enough? You had enough. Had enough. Okay. Very good.
The good part about the panel I basically get to moderate is all of you are so incredibly passionate about the technologies that you actually are talking about, right? So Jim, one of the big things, having read your article, is the whole Internet of Things, right? Like, where are we? Are we like in the first inning of a 9-innings game? Where are we in terms of the Internet of Things?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because I live in Boston, and we have a lot of international clients come visit us, and occasionally I take an international group down to Fenway and we watch a baseball game together. And, you know, it's pretty hard to understand baseball first time around. So I always say I think we're at like the midpoint of the second inning, where, you know, you've seen an inning and a half and you're kind of starting to understand how it's played, but you still have some questions, but you have no clue how it will end. Yeah. So I think that, you know, we're starting to see patterns here. And, I mean, probably most people in the room or somebody in your family has a Fitbit or a Fuel Band or some kind of quantified self device or a wearable of some sort. Certainly you all have smartphones, if we want to count that. Maybe you live in a smart home or you've been in a smart home. You know, you probably either have an automobile that's connected to the internet, or maybe you watch the Super Bowl and notice that Chevy let off that ad about the new truck talking about its 4G LTE connectivity capabilities, which was sort of interesting. So I think we're starting to see what's possible, but people can't yet comprehend what we could do with it. You know, the kinds of efficiencies we could create, the way that we would evolve products so much quicker if we actually understood how they were used. The way that we'd actually change the way they operate if we had feedback loops, you know, that we would run algorithms in the sky and in the product, and we'd use big data, and we'd have the product continually adjusting itself and its usage motions to create a lot more productivity. We can't begin to comprehend the business model changes we'll see, although, you know, we've seen what Uber has done really by understanding and unlocking latent capacity in the transportation system. through sensors. In this case, the sensor is simply an iPhone or a smartphone reporting whether the driver's online or not and available or not and where they are, and then hooking that driver up with a passenger. We're starting to see disruptive business models. We're starting to see breakthrough products. But it's very difficult to comprehend where this will all go in the next 10 years. But I'm obviously pretty excited about it because having studied it a lot, I see some just incredible things happening.
Yeah, this sounds like a great opportunity. Katrine, in terms of genomics, right, like in the biotech stuff, we've been talking about this for a long time in terms of human genomics. Like, where do we think we are in your perspective, and what do you think the next 5 years would look like?
So I sometimes talk about genomic medicine as the fourth frontier of medicine. If the first two, which came around the same time, around the turn of the 20th century, were vaccines and using small molecules or little chemistry drugs, the third frontier came in the sort of late 70s with biologics, proteins, and the great biotech companies that were built off of that, Genentech and Biogen and Amgen being in that first generation. The genomics medicine wave, there have been pieces of it coming along, but you're seeing it explode now in a number of different ways. If you look at gene therapy companies, the number of companies that have shown truly transformational results, at this big hematology and oncology conference in December, showing that you could essentially cure patients with beta thalassemia, which is a terrible blood disorder, by giving them a gene that repairs what was their broken gene. This has been an idea that's been around for a long time. And to use I love nerdy science analogies, it's either a super saturated solution or you've hit critical mass or whatever you want. But there's a confluence of a number of different data, understanding of data, technologies, et cetera. Just as you were talking about sensors being critical to what you're doing, what I'll call the genomics infrastructure. The investment in sequencing the human genome was worth it, right? Maybe it took longer for that value to be realized than we had anticipated, but what we're doing now is because that investment was made. And it's been an infrastructure, just like building roads is an infrastructure. Some of the folks on the earlier panel were talking a lot about physical infrastructure. In my world, what matters more is knowledge infrastructure and data infrastructure. The human genome being one example of many. And I think that the president's point about precision medicine and the initiative he's proposing there is a further investment in that will further potentiate being able to know how to fix genetic diseases or genetic drivers of disease. But I think that all of those come together now. We're able to start to make these medicines, not because of any one thing, but because of a lot of things coming together. The knowledge, the data infrastructure, the technologies. And then, frankly, in my world, investment. For all of you who are people with businesses that have revenue and profits, biotech is going to seem completely weird because in my company, I am expecting to raise and spend about $2 billion before I make any money. That's what it takes to make a new medicine. Now, there are a lot of people who are willing to invest, and there's tremendous risk. I can give you all kinds of statistics about the probability of failure. That's fine, but that's also what it takes to make a new medicine, and I have no problem with that risk. And my goal is to go find the people who are willing to take that risk along with me. Last year, just to give you a sense of, particularly in the United States, the willingness to take that risk is unique in the world. It just is. The capital availability here is profound. There's wonderful science in Europe and Japan and many other places, and they do not have the capital availability to take these risks. Last year, $40 billion was raised in the US for investment in young biotech. $8 billion of that in venture, $8 billion in IPOs, the rest in secondaries and such. That's 1 year's worth of capital. And that's funding all kinds of spectacular research, not just genetic-based medicines, immuno-oncology, and a lot of other stuff. That's why we can do it here, is not only the science, but also the capital availability.
So Klaus, you're just talking about your technologies in aerospace, and I live in Detroit. I have to say everyone talks about Alcoa in a different way after the F-150 launch. Yeah, so if you basically look at it and you say, what are some of the new developments that you see a few years out, right? Like you've already talked about a lot in aerospace, but also in other fields, because you fundamentally could transform many industries.
Yeah, well, those examples that I gave are not just for aerospace. I mean, the jet engine side and the other is automotive. I mean, I think new materials basically go into pretty much everything. And if you look around, I mean, many of you have devices, you know. I mean, just looking at this one device there, you know, and it's all encased in aluminum. Who would have thought, you know, if you can hold it up, see beautiful aluminum shining there. See that? I mean, that's so nice. And a wonderful surface. You touch it every day. And so, which isn't that true? I mean, it has a nice tactile feel, you know. So, who would have thought, honestly? And it has penetrated so many areas of our life. I mean, everybody has it at home, and so I'm not concerned about that. I mean, we predict for this year that we're going to have another 7% increase of demand growth for aluminum worldwide. And I've said a while ago that in this century, the demand for aluminum is going to double worldwide, and that requires a 6.5% growth per year. So far in this century, the growth number has been well above it, you know. So, and again, I mean, we are not just aluminum, we are now also other materials and a lot of lightweighting. I think that let's also talk about the enablers, which I'm particularly happy about. At the same time, I'm concerned about it because there's so much. I mean, you were talking about the Internet of Things, you were talking about some of the data analysis, right? And all of these things come together in a way. The big challenge I see, I mean, is how do I make my team aware of all the opportunities, right? And because I had this experience, I love traveling also to our plants and then go around and talk to folks. And recently I was in one of the rolling mills and they introduced me. We have this internship program through which we introduced me to a young group of folks, and they had taken basically out of their cell phones, they've taken the cameras out and put an array of optical sensors together and put this on a big piece of aluminum and then wrote a little bit of software behind it, right? And installed it over a slitter. A slitter is basically a line which slits off the sides of a coil. And typically there was there was a person standing left and right of it inspecting whether the slitter was working. It's basically 3 shifts, you know. And they put it in there, looked at this. The device probably cost $500 if it costs a lot. The software they did themselves, most of they downloaded, right? A little pattern recognition, right? And they could immediately eliminate the 2 people, right? Because obviously, I mean, those optical sensors, the resolution is much, much higher than the resolution of an eye, and it never gets tired. So then the next debate was, oh wow, I mean, because those 2 people standing there and the capabilities of the human eye and the tiredness was a limiting factor that we couldn't run the machine faster, right? So we could immediately start to run the machine faster, and this was a machine that was a bottleneck in the shop. So these young kids, not knowing what they did, just were playing around with stuff that is totally natural to them, and what they have found is something that is literally worth a couple of hundreds of millions, you know. And my struggle is, how do I get more of this into the organization? And goes through from sensing. I mean, sensing is revolutionizing, really revolutionary, to communication devices, you know, to the question of assembling the data and then analyzing the data, doing it real time, the importance of automation that you can put into this. So the list is long. How do I get this as a natural thing injected in the whole organization, right? So that's my biggest challenge today.
So I know we'll get to the questions from the audience, but just a couple of questions just to get the conversation started, right? You're all distinct in what you do, right? Like from atoms to genes to digital stuff, but truly innovative, right? Like in your own fields. But, you know, all of you are, well, yeah, we realize you're trying to get to 30% startup, but, you know, how do you stay ahead of the global competition, right? Like, how do you make sure that, you know, you have your talent issues? We get the fact on capital, Katrine, that you raised, but how do you truly stay ahead of the global competition? Maybe, Jim, we start off with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the United States in the area of bits, you know, I mean, we invented the whole concept, and we've had, you know, an incredible lead. I mean, I think it's getting more distributed around the world, but, you know, as bits become more important to every company and every product and every manufacturing process and so forth, I think that we in the U.S. have a great opportunity to leverage, you know, what's a core fundamental advantage we've had since the beginning. I think we have to invest more in it, but you know, this idea of clusters and ecosystems is very important. You know, I think in our business, I'm fortunate to be in Boston. in Boston. I'm on the board of one of the biggest automotive and industrial sensor companies in the world. We have, let's say, in EMC and Pivotal and VMware, and RSA, we have some of the best data and cloud and security infrastructure. We have a number of software companies in the engineering and service and Internet of Things world, sharing talent pools and building off each other. We have a great venture capital community. So I think that we got to leverage all of those assets and then, keep thinking outside the box. I know how things are done today, but how could we imagine them being done tomorrow in a way that's very different and more powerful and transformative? And then, let's figure out how to go do that and create the right kind of partnerships and the right kind of companies and the right kind of alignments that would allow us as a U.S. headquartered company to lead. Now, we're U.S. headquartered. 60% of our revenue comes from outside the U.S., so we're a big exporter of technology. But we have to do the core innovation, back at home in order to sustain that position, because we certainly have global competitors on almost every front. But I think it's this quest for always to think about a different tomorrow and then try to be the one that makes it happen.
I guess I have a bit of an odd view towards competition. One is that I like it because I think that great rivals can make each other better. Think about two great sports rivals. Do you want to watch the world great playing the local club master? No, you want to watch the two world greats playing one another. They raise the level of each other's game. Plus, in my world, where the goal is to try to make therapeutics, if we didn't quite get there, maybe it's because it didn't work scientifically, but maybe it's because somebody else made a better product, and therefore a patient is going to suffer less. It's kind of hard to feel bad about that. So the competition to create a better therapeutic, that is something that there's rarely going to be one solution for patients. Patients are diverse. You need a variety of solutions. So partly it's really understanding what problem are you solving and making sure that you're really relentlessly focused on that. There can be new technologies that make us obsolete. The world of biotech, you hope that you're kind of continually making yourself obsolete. And whether that's within a company or a program, I don't think so much about the competitiveness of my company as, are we going to create great therapies? Maybe we'll do it on our own. Maybe we'll do it with partners. Whatever gets there the fastest and creates the most value, I'm happy to take that solution. I have responsibilities to my employees, to my shareholders, to the patients, to the physicians that we work with. As long as all of those are getting served, there's a lot of ways that we can be a successful company. I've been in the industry about 25 years, and I've been part of two companies that were acquired, another one that's now a $90 billion company, part of another startup that failed, part of another startup that's now a sort of $5 billion company. So I've seen a lot of different ways that these things can evolve. At the end of the day, I think the metric is how many drugs came out of that, and so far the answer is 3 approved and about 10 in development. I will say, being based in Boston, for biotech, it's the probably most important place in the world to be right now. And if you ask anybody in the industry, you see all the pharma companies essentially relocating their R&D to Boston. I looked up some statistics to prepare for this, and it turns out little Massachusetts has the most bioscience R&D employees in the country, about 28,000. It's more than California, 24,000. Of those, 23,000 are in the Boston-Cambridge area. Right now they're snowbound, but they're all right there, and the density of interactions is, I think, where you get this absolutely unprecedented competitiveness of that cluster, right? And so being able to always have another opportunity to create the next technology is in part because of where we are.
It's actually quite interesting. Even in the previous panel, everyone spoke about the clusters for the STEM workforce in a different way.
Yeah.
But now we are hearing on a technology which is the cutting edge technology, and both of you just almost reiterated it.
It's interesting too for my industry. I assume it's the same for others. It's also the ancillary factors. People talk about incubators. I hate the phrase incubator because it misses the point, right? It's not just, for me, the hospitals, the academic laboratories, the big companies, the small companies. It's also the attorneys, the intellectual property attorneys, the corporate attorneys, the PR folks, the part-time human resources people who know how to do biotech a day a week. the part-time lab manager for when you're 30 people and you don't need somebody full-time, but who's been doing it for 30 years. The fact that Alexandria Real Estate, which does lab buildings, they built, basically they're building entire, millions of square feet in the Cambridge area. And knowing that you have a landlord who knows how to build you a building, lab buildings are hard to build, right? Can't even imagine building a vacuum that can house that. Right, these very, very technical facilities, you really want somebody good at it building that. So there's all of those aspects of the infrastructure that are very sophisticated. Education was mentioned. One of my favorite programs in Boston is Northeastern. I don't know if you use their co-op students. They're awesome. Yeah. If you don't know the Northeastern co-op program, you should. It's spectacular. Yeah, for all of our industries, right? I hire these students all the time, and they are amazing. And they do what they did. They built us a computer. Our summer intern built us a computer that was 5 times faster than what we could get. It was great. And now it's analyzing all of our guide RNA data.
Yeah, I think if I could add to that, the education environment in Boston is truly special. I mean, the phrase Internet of Things was coined at MIT, out of their auto ID lab that drove the RFID, which is sort of a pretty important precursor to the bigger concept of Internet of Things. The research I did with Professor Porter suggests that Harvard's involved, and everybody knows MIT and Harvard, but when you take Northeastern and you add the rest, there's like 100 more colleges and universities in the Boston area that are providing a talent pool that's just unparalleled.
And the sports teams are good.
Yeah, sports teams are good too. Well, Ron's a little sore about that. By the way,
I think what that echoes is one thing that is that microphone working? Have I done something wrong here? Yeah, it's working now. So what that echoes is basically the enormous importance of talent, right? That's what it starts with. And as long as I can think, I've always said talent is the only sustainable competitive advantage in today's world, And if I look at, when has something succeeded and when has it failed? It's really only 2 components in the end. It's the people. And that's where it starts with. And the second component, I'd say, is whether people can work in a high-performance team, Because that's unfortunately what you sometimes see, that you have a single performer who's excellent as a single performer, but when you put them together and create something bigger, they can't get their act together, So it's really those 2 things, So what we are aspiring is to find a way how to attract the best and brightest. The recent years with the crisis have actually helped there. There was a time when we really were very frustrated going to the top universities, and literally nobody would really be interested in listening. And I still remember, I'm not going to mention one. It's an East Coast, Ivy League, and they lured me in, but they for a meeting with their business school folks, and they said, "Hey, we really don't know." Kind of setting the bar very low. We really don't know how many people are going to show up. Don't be surprised, might only be 10. In the end, they had to switch the room, to go to the biggest room. And this is 3 years ago, and it's fascinating to see, the positive change that's happened on there. I think the message, particularly to the very good students, has gotten through. There's a lot going on, and this is an exciting thing. And there's a lot of people that say, I want to create something. I want to leave something behind, and they want to also at the same time have an international career. So this is a positive thing. That's a really, really positive thing. On the concept of the clusters, I am a big believer of clusters, and I still remember when Michael Porter's book came out, where he very nicely put these things together, the advantage of nations, I think that's a competitive advantage of nations. Yes, exactly. That's what it was called. So I think it's fantastic. And for us, the critical thing, if you can get it in a proximity, the better off you are, right? For us, you sometimes are not at the luxury that my locations are at places where you even have a hard time to get there, right? And that historically has been for all kinds of reasons, whether it's energy, whether it's transportation, or whether it's defense reasons, why they are at places like Davenport, you're in Tennessee, or what God knows where, So or in upstate New York, So we have to bridge it, but I'm very aware that this bridging, of a location that's remote adds some complexity, right? But the other thing is also there, with proximity with aerospace as well as automotive, modern technology can help, but you have to bridge it. You have to make the cluster feelable, to those folks with all the modern communication media. And the other thing that we use cluster concepts for is on the education side, right? Because when you want to start something in the region, to design the program, the educational program in such a way that it really benefits the region, you have to have a deeper understanding of what is the industrial cluster in the region and what are the needs, and those things really work extremely well. And there you go rather micro than macro.
Got it. Maybe we take some questions from the audience. Go ahead. If we could keep it to a question format more than a statement, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Fred Altman. I have a question for Katrina. In most areas, as the technology progresses, the prices go down. This medicine seems to be a notable exception to that. With genomic medicine, is that likely to change the curve?
It's a great question. It's actually one of the challenges that we have, as to how do we think about the ultimate economic model, because if what we do is a one-time treatment that's a cure, how are we going to make that work economically? I don't know the answer to your question. What I can say, though, is that the new medicines that get introduced do tend to get introduced at very high prices, particularly those that really extend life, etc. In addition, when a drug comes off patent, within 6 months of coming off patent, usually 90% of the branded sales are gone. So it comes off a cliff, and then the generic comes in at a much lower price. And frankly, that's great. That's as it should be. Patent life has a defined time period, and then when it's done, and it's in the public domain. So I do think that the high prices command attention for a lot of very good reasons. Not everybody can afford them. If you have a high copay, it can be very difficult. I think companies have a role in trying to find solutions. Most companies with high-priced products do have programs to pay for that product where patients can't afford it. Obviously, the economic model is different in a lot of countries. But in addition, I think if you look at the overall arc of new medicines over time, they earn their return and then they become generic is the general model. So I realize it's not a complete answer to your question. I'm sure that new genomic medicines will not be cheap, but I think too they will deliver results that are unprecedented, and so finding the balance in how we pay for it is something that companies have to be a part of solving as well.
Helmut, I think you had a question.
Helmut Ludwig from Siemens. The study presented today on advanced industries talks a lot about the importance of small and medium enterprise for innovation, for growth, for employment. Klaus, Alcoa is not only a leader in materials, but also on its way to a digital enterprise. How do you make sure you take the supply chain, which very often are small and medium enterprises, with you on this journey?
Well, it's a challenge, but at the same time, I think it's also an opportunity, because with the capabilities that the digital chain allows, and the cost in this, to the earlier question, in our industry, the costs have substantially come down. So on most of these things, they are relatively cheap. And also you find software models which are per use software models. One of the big problems before was, you always had to negotiate with the supplier that they first had to enable their whole software structure. Now you find more and more often you find pay-per-use models. So in my view, has made it all much easier, right? And then on top of it, the pressure, because of the big advantage that it brings to the end customer, on the whole supply chain has also increased. So I think everybody understands, that you want to be integrated. For instance, I mean, we didn't talk about 3D printing. I mean, which we use today on a regular basis, even for large and very complicated parts. Metal parts. In some hybrid structures, and it typically brings down the lead time by more than 50% and the cost by more than 50%, and that's a huge advantage in terms of not just speeding up the development process, but also allowing for a faster innovation process. Because before, people wouldn't have the budget and wouldn't have the time to play with 3-4 concepts. Now they can play with 3-4 concepts in parallel, right? But for this, you basically have a closed chain between a closed digital chain from the CAD design, to the making, to the pilot production, and then back for the test results going back into the CAD one, right? So that it's a seamless chain, and I think it's much easier today, really much easier, and much cheaper also.
Antoine?
A question for Klaus. You've operated both in Germany and here. What would you say are the distinguishing characteristics that make Germany and the US different in terms of their potential to innovate?
I think some of the things, let's start with some unique advantage that exists here in the US. And some of it we already heard. I mean, what you have been referring to is the availability of venture capital money, right? This is so many people have tried it, and there are some pockets, like in Berlin, you see this coming up. But I recently had a discussion with a good friend of mine, Peter Thiel, over this, who also has a good footing in Germany. And I mean, he had some studies showing clearly that the returns on venture capital investments over in Europe are substantially lower, and you would say, why is that so? There's something else there, and I guess the something else could also be the access to the market. I mean, the US market in most of the industries is substantially bigger as a homogeneous market, right? Whereas in Europe, you have very often, you still have some boundaries of applications, of traditions, So I think there's a couple of things that make things in principle easier here, right? The other thing that I find easier here also is the attitude of failure is an honor, not deadly, right? Because I mean, some of my venture capital friends are always tell me, and they are not joking actually, that they say, if we invest in a company, we actually want to meet with senior management, and we want to hear where senior management has failed, and we are not investing in a company where we are not having senior management that has failed somewhere before, because we don't want to be the first ones paying for their failure. So whereas in Europe, very often you have the counter position. People have failed once, and therefore they have a burn mark on their forehead, and people don't want them to be leading something, right? That's very, very different. The thing now on the European side, I mean, you have ingrained, and that's different obviously in Europe, but in Germany it's very, very strong. You have an engineering culture, and to be an engineer is a badge of honor. And you have, I mean, over hundreds of years, I mean, you have a tradition that when you are an engineer, or when you work in an engineering environment, even as an apprentice, you have a certain honor code, I would say, and you have an esteem in society. You don't have to have a 12-year education in high school and then have gone to college. I mean, if you have gone through an apprenticeship program and worked in a shop, I mean, the esteem that you would have in society would be very, very high, because people would know even when they give you something very complicated, you would be able to manufacture, and you would not deviate from the highest quality standards that would be expected from you. So this is sometimes something I'm sure that you struggle with, when you want to get some glass made or something, where it might not be exactly to the specs, but then the great thing about America comes in, we then basically say an 80% solution is great, just rather go for the speed, which sometimes hampers on the European side, because they would rather want to go for 100% solution, right?
I think we are a little, sorry.
I was going to share an observation building on what Klaus said, which is this idea that it's an esteemed badge of honor to be an engineer in Germany. And I see that all the time with our German customers. And I think a part of the problem in the U.S. isn't the output of the universities, it's the input into the universities. That kids don't grow up wanting to be an astronaut like I did anymore. They just don't. True. And that's a real problem. And one of the things our company's been involved in and very supportive of are high school level programs that are trying to inspire kids to be engineers or let's say STEM graduates of some sort, things like FIRST Robotics and a Real World Design Challenge and Starbase. And there's a lot of programs that are supported by various federal agencies and so forth. But the real problem is that I think if you doubled the amount of STEM graduate programs, I think you'd have a lot of empty chairs right now. So I think we need to change the cultural attitude of people to want to be those advanced people that make these kind of companies work, or we're going to keep having, as a percentage, fewer and fewer of them. And we can't blame the universities. We should blame the moms and dads.
Well, one of the advantages that we have here used to be the immigration side. I mean, because there were long lines, out there of the best and brightest that do want to be an engineer. And we have this great education institutions. But I think in the last years, unfortunately, through our own making, we've fallen behind, which is very, very sad.
We train them and send them home.
Yeah, exactly.
First of all, I want to thank all three of you for your time. I know we're a little bit short of time and there are a lot of raised hands, but we first want to thank all three of you for taking out the time out of your busy schedule. So if we could all thank them. Thank you.
So can everyone hear me? And I'm sure we'll hear the governor. I'm Mark Murrell, Senior Fellow here at Brookings, lead author of this work, along with a great team. And it's my privilege to take this in a bit of a different direction now. I think we've, the first panel really talked about the new plausibility of the American platform for this advanced industry activity. The second panel took us deep into the world of technology development. I think incredible opportunities are evident there, but I think I picked up the sense that it's going to be a tumultuous, exciting ride to stay ahead, both for firms, but for states, regions, places, and individuals too. So, what I thought we should do now, though, is to bring this home not only to our region and the state of Virginia, but the sense of what governments, what regions can do, and how they fit in this incredible set of trends I think we've been talking about. So to do that, I'd like to introduce the irrepressible Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Honorable Terry McAuliffe. I think rounding out his first year in office, Virginia's 72nd governor, a lot of illustrious predecessors you've had, but to talk about the work of advancing advanced industries. Now, not only is Virginia a true powerhouse in this sector, given its 400,000 workers in the advanced industry sector, the Commonwealth is fifth among states for the density of those workers, which we think is the right way to look at this. It's not how many, but how big a share of your economic operation. 11% the economy directly employed in these industries. So this is a significant, diverse presence in the state. I don't know if Terry calls them advanced industries, but I do know he's all over the sector. He's made it clear whether he's traveling to Bedford or Beijing, he's all about these industries. He's certainly sought to attract them, but he's spending an awful lot of time, I think we're going to hear about, and growing them organically within the state as well. So what I thought we'd do is spend maybe about 30 minutes here, have a dialogue about what, why, and where in Virginia, and then we'll open this back up. But I thought maybe, why don't we just start, to what extent does this whole concept resonate to you? I mean, we've had separate discussions. We have a discussion about manufacturing, separate discussion about energy. We seem to talk about software, services. It's all sort of fragmented. We're trying to put it all together. Do you see a continuity here, and are these the right things to be thinking about?
Well, clearly, Mark, they're the right things to be thinking about, because if you're going to grow and diversify an economy, it is your advanced manufacturing sector that's going to do it for you. I'm here. I do want to introduce my Secretary of Commerce, Maurice Jones, who is here with us today. But he and I have spent the last year, we're in a very unique situation in Virginia. We are the #1 recipient of Department of Defense dollars, #1 in America. We have a lot of military assets. We have the largest naval base in the world. The Pentagon is in Virginia, the CIA, Quantico. That's great when they're spending money, but when they're cutting back through defense cuts and sequestration, we get hit harder than anyone else. So our whole emphasis is bringing in businesses and building businesses that are less reliant on the federal government. That is my whole goal, and this is what I think about every day. We've had tremendous success in our first year. We did about 270 economic development projects. We brought in about $5.6 billion of direct investment, many of those advanced manufacturing. Not that anyone's counting, but I'm proud to say that is double what any governor has done in the history of Virginia in their first year in office, and we're just warming up. But we've brought businesses back from, exciting businesses, the largest greenfield, the largest Chinese investment in America. We just won that in Virginia, $2 billion investment, 2,000 jobs, advanced paper manufacturing company. Appomattox, Virginia, we just made an announcement the other day. This is what I talk about. This is exciting. It brings technology, brings it all together. We got a company from China to come back in and invest millions and millions of dollars to take over a shuttered furniture facility, which we've now reopened, and they are now manufacturing pollution control devices, which we take manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and we take that finished product to our port, and guess what? We sell the finished product back to China. That's as good as it gets. We take their money to come back and reopen a plant. We build manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, use our port, deepest port in the East Coast, and that's what you have to do. And we've done dozens and dozens of these types of operations in Virginia, less reliant on the federal government, new 21st century technologies. I enjoy selling. I did 7 trade missions last year. We'll continue to do it. But listen, you got to have the fundamentals, innovation, creativity, a world-class infrastructure. We have very low tax rates in Virginia. We're 6% corporate tax. It's been like that for 45 years. It's not changing. Very pro-business environment, infrastructure, Dulles Airport, deepest port on the East Coast, world-class education system. And, when we get all sort of this gelling together, working together, we are very competitive. We can bring any business back we want. Building technology is so critical. And the one thing I'd say, these jobs pay more than standard jobs. In Northern Virginia, in advanced manufacturing, the average pay is $100,000 compared to $65,000 for those non-advanced manufacturing jobs. So as governor, we're creating a lot of jobs. I just announced the lowest unemployment rate in Virginia since 2008. So the lowest we've had in 6 years. Jobs are jobs, but we want to make sure they're good paying jobs. And these advanced manufacturing, on average, pay double.
What are some of the industries you're focusing on most, too? It seems like you've got, by our accounting, a really diverse array. You've got the shipbuilding on the one sense, classic manufacturing, but then you've got a whole bunch of digital and IT and even energy activities.
Well, Virginia's a great state. I always say we're like 5 different states. If you look at Northern Virginia, we have more data centers than any other state in America that we have up in Northern Virginia. We have more tech workers per capita. We have more tech workers than any state in the United States of America. So Northern Virginia, a lot of tech-related data centers, tech businesses booming here, related to the federal government, of course. But then you go down to the Hampton Roads region. I am such a huge advocate of the Hampton Roads region. We have the largest naval base in the world. You know, you've got Virginia Beach, you've got the tourism. You know, that is a dynamic economy down there. And we're trying to bring in businesses that piggyback. I mean, it's great that we have the largest naval base in the world. We have a lot of cybersecurity related industries down there because of the military assets. So we're really trying to grow cybersecurity. The president, as you know, just put about $270 million in the budget. They're going to build what we call a new cyber campus. We want that in Virginia. I've told the president it needs to be in Virginia, because when Virginia grows, America grows. Forget the other 49 states. They really don't matter. It's got to be done in Virginia. Yeah. But, you know, what I talked about in Appomattox with pollution control devices, but I'm really trying to help South Side, Southwest Virginia, which really have been hurt. Textile, tobacco, furniture, you know, over the last 30, 40 years have been decimated. We just brought another company back that, that is doing manufacturing. We've got aerospace, huge aerospace business that we're building in Virginia. Alcoa just did a big announcement on their blades that they use in their advanced manufacturing. Continental just announced a huge deal in Newport News related. That's 500 new jobs. Auto supply manufacturing for parts. We beat Mexico out to get that, which was a huge win for us. So honestly, Mark, there's not a business we won't chase. Right. If it's jobs, we're after it. And I want it in Virginia, and we're going to go get it. It has to make economic sense. We don't chase every deal. Yeah. But really trying to build the manufacturing. I am so excited. But then again, those who know me, I'm always excited. But I'm really excited. We just announced a new pipeline. It'll be the biggest pipeline built, over 500 miles. We will now be bringing natural gas to Virginia from the Marcellus and the Utica Shale. What this pipeline will allow us to do, we already have very cheap energy costs. Our mix, we're about 41% nuclear today, and we've got about 30% gas, and small percentage now of coal and some of the renewables. But with the nuclear we have today, with this new pipeline, there's no reason, because these pipeline folks are like highways, and you can do an exit and enter ramp anywhere you want to a manufacturing facility. Why are we being successful bringing all these billions back from China? Because we are now competitive. You can get into the United States market. 40% of America is 1 hour's drive from Virginia. You've got the deepest port in the East Coast, but if you want to enter the U.S. market, low energy costs really make up a difference on the differential on employment pay. I can now compete with any Asia country on manufacturing. And this pipeline will take us to the next level. And then, so it's exciting.
Factor.
Yeah, and it's all manufacturing. So I really focus on manufacturing. These are good paying jobs. We have to do a lot more work in fairness. I think every governor struggles with this. Workforce development, we all talk about it. We are really hitting it hard. I think we have 30 or 40 bills in the legislature right now on workforce development. I know a lot of folks talk about degrees. I tell my education department, Secretary Holton, don't talk to me about degrees. I don't want to hear it. I want to hear about skill sets. You get out of college or school with a degree, with a lot of debt, and without a skill set is immaterial to me as governor. I want credentialing done. I've called for 50,000 credentials by the time I leave office. I've called for 500,000 credentials by 2030. We have 165,000 credentials right now in Virginia. That will make us #1 in America. There's not a job we cannot fill. But it is taking the jobs that exist today and matching them with our education system to build a skill set. I have 30,000 jobs open in Northern Virginia today in the high-tech space. They're not going to wait for me. They'll go to another state. So changing our whole mode of operation, of how we do it, working together, acting regionally instead of everybody fighting each other, building those credentials. That's how you build a state economy.
I mean, in our report, we highlight sort of three priorities. On the one hand, commit to innovation. Yep. Build that skills pipeline, and then we talk a lot about ecosystems, those regional economies. I'm curious. You want to talk a little about? Pretty impressive set going back. Prior to your administration, now you're continuing some very innovative efforts in the innovation space. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Well, we have something very unique in Virginia that no other state really has. We have, the Commonwealth's Advanced Manufacturing, CCAM, which has got a lot of great companies and Rolls-Royce. And basically, we have about 21 companies who've come together to fund this operation. And we have 5 universities. It is a very collaborative effort. So the universities who have all of this great research, they have a problem on commercializing and taking it out to market. Right. So we match them with the companies who at times have a problem on the research. So we brought them together and they now work collectively in one place so that you pool your resources. So all 5 universities who are coming up with these great new innovative ideas, all the 21 companies share in that research and development and that technology that's developed. They all are involved in it. And it really has broken down barriers. It has incentivized our universities to commercialize and to go out into the market. And it's helped spread the costs for R&D, which for many businesses is prohibitive. But they've all come together under CCAM in Virginia. So this is a great idea that we have going. And more companies are constantly coming in with sort of new avenues of innovation that they want us to look at.
Does that tie into the skills work? Or talk about some of the things you're doing skills-wise as well. I mean, it seems like you're doing apprenticeship, you're doing STEM education at some scale.
We're doing it. In fact, all this legislation, we're very creative. If we can get past, we're in session right now, so we sort of laugh here. We're working hard. If we can get past all these bills that I have, I think we have 40 governor's bills. I would say half of them relate to workforce development, to close this skills gap and to give the credentialing. And listen, this is not a partisan issue. And I think we're going to have tremendous success. We've already seen a lot of our bills get through subcommittee. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is about Virginia. This is about being competitive because we are in a unique position of the headwinds of sequestration that no other state has. Now, Maryland has challenges because, everybody here is sort of defense, government related. Mm-hmm. But we're more vulnerable than anyone else. So I'm very optimistic we can get this done. But doing the credentialing, getting into our schools earlier, we need, and I know I agree with the gentleman here before, we got to get down in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, start talking about these STEM courses. I tell my Secretary of Education and my Superintendent of Schools, when these kids come into kindergarten, I want a Crayola book that says STEM on the front. Because if you wait till high school or college, I mean, listen, I just saw a report the other day, women, they're declining going into the STEM courses. Makes no sense to me. We should be growing today. These jobs exist. And in Virginia, here's the challenge I face. In the next decade, I'm going to have 955,000 Virginians retire. We're going to have 500,000 new jobs being created. That's 1.4 million. These are going to be new jobs and new technologies. We better have an education system that is very nimble, that can work very quickly with the business sector to say, what do you need? We have Newport News Shipyard, obviously spectacular, thousands and thousands of employees. Right now they're building 9 nuclear submarines, Virginia-class submarines. They've had an apprenticeship for years. They go away 4 or 5 years. They work with our 2 community colleges in the region. They get their degrees. They're working simultaneously. They're being paid. But they tell us at the education system, here's what I need. They would hire every single welder that we can give them. And I think the average pay, Maurice, $60,000, $70,000 starting out. These are good paying jobs. But we need to do that with every sector to match. And I really encourage our business community to get out. We'll move our education system. I know, sometimes it's like moving an aircraft carrier. As you probably can tell, patience is not a virtue that will be chiseled into my tombstone. Not going to happen. We will move very quickly on this. I get out of bed, being honest with you. I got to compete against 49 governors and 200 nations around the globe. Yep. I want to beat them. I want us to win every single jobs development project in the globe. Now, you don't get that, but that's how I think in education early on, and then doing the credentialing that we're talking about and building an innovative system. And for folks that are watching, let me be very clear. We have very low taxes, 6%, as I say. Hasn't changed in 45 years, not changing. Very pro-business environment. If you're thinking of doing business, I have the deepest port in the East Coast. When these post-Panamax ships come around next year, I'm talking 10, 12, 14,000 TEUs. There's only one port they can come to on the East Coast. That's Virginia, our deep channel. Now, they'll come to Virginia now, these huge ships, and they'll offload their cargo, and the ship will rise, and then they'll go to those dinky ports in Baltimore and New York where they can get in, and then they'll load their ship up, and then they'll come down to Virginia. And with my new pipeline, with the new advanced manufacturing, take it all, train it right down, and we'll load the ship up, and it'll go back over to Asia selling product.
Do you? That's an exciting vision.
Yeah,
you're selling it externally and internally.
Yep.
I think we heard in the panel before some concern about not so much the outputs of the university system and the outputs of training systems, but the inputs that we're simply not, engaging, as you're saying, kids at the young enough level.
And we're not.
How are you thinking about that, and how are you?
And we are,
and
you're exactly right. We've got to listen. The jobs exist there today, but we have got the STEM H courses. Obviously, we have to do a much better job, and it goes down to your teachers. And listen, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I have school districts in Virginia that are in real serious trouble. That's my first priority, to make sure we get every school district where they need to be. I'm tired of people complaining about schools. It's time to take action. So in my budget, we have proposals for new training for teachers, for our principals, for our school board members. I mean, be honest with you, Mark, you got to get into the weeds in your education system. And it's not about throwing more money at universities and our higher ed. It's not. It's starting earlier K through 12. I happen to be a huge advocate of pre-K. If 80% of the brain is developed between birth and 4 or 5 years old, why is every child not entitled to that ability to go to a pre-K? So I'm really trying to work hard on this issue. I just received about $17.5 million. I want to thank Arnie Duncan if you're watching TV. I'll have about 1,600 at-risk children in Virginia that now will be able to go to pre-K because of a nice federal grant that we received on that. So I would make the argument, start early, but we need to do a better job of exciting children in that K through 12 about the STEM H courses. We need to do a better job, all of us, and it really comes down to, and I agree, it's parents, but it's also your teachers to get them excited. So maybe change how we think about STEM H courses in higher ed. Let's start thinking K through 12. Let's get some of the best teachers early to get them excited about it.
And even this whole industry complex we're talking about, these advanced industries, many manufacturing that, I think people associate with decline over 25 years, and yet we're now seeing a different trajectory. Do you feel there's a broad understanding of, the kind of opportunities and what these industries look like now? I mean, I think our suggestion is there isn't, a broad feel, and there's a great concern that, a sense of overhang of lost jobs in the past. Do you talk some about that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I do think some of these industries for some young people may not be as sexy as some other areas that they want to go in and exciting. That's totally false, because if you just look at the data and then the report that you have, these are very high paying jobs. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. In the old days, did I want to go on and be a welder and all that? Well, I'm telling you, I can hire every welder you can give me in Virginia today to go down and work at our shipyard. So I agree with you. We need to do a better job of explaining. And listen, when kids come to college now, I always say in the first week of school, we need to be telling them 4 years later when you graduate, here are the jobs that are going to be available. We don't seem to be doing that in our higher ed system. When you come to freshman orientation, I think it's great. Let them all have a good time and we do the orientation stuff. But you lay out statistics. Here's the courses you need to take to fill. Here's how many jobs are available today in this sector. Boom, 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 boom. And if you want to work here, here's what you're going to get paid, and here are the courses you need to take. We don't do that. And we're really trying to shake up our education system to get us to do that. Yeah. I had fun in college like everybody else in this room, but telling them that in 4 years you're going to get out and you know that these jobs will exist, I think is probably the most important thing we can do. And I've talked a lot. We have a lot of folks in Virginia that are really serious about our higher education. I think someone told me Debbie Wynn was going to be here today. I don't know if Debbie is actually. Debbie Wynn, who used to be the CEO of Landmark and was one of the founders of the Weather Channel. And Debbie and I have had many conversations about this. I mean, this is what we have to do to build that. Listen, I feel very good. There's not a job we can't bring to Virginia. I love the challenge. I like to beat the other states. I love it. But I got to convince a CEO, in fairness, if you're going to spend millions, like all these millions that these companies are now spending in Virginia, that they're going to have a workforce 10, 20, 30 years. That's a fair argument to have. And it's not talk. You got to prove it to them. Yeah. You know, our whole economic development team, they spend hours sitting with companies trying to explain to them that you invest this, we're going to have that workforce for you. So it's all tied together.
Yeah.
It's a global economy.
It absolutely is. Let's talk a little about, I think we've been talking most of the morning on the one hand about the relative competitive opportunities or deficits in the U.S. We've talked about technologies. I'm interested about politics and policy. Let's talk a little about the role of a state, a role of a governor at a time where, we certainly, it's no secret that the federal apparatus is not getting it done right now. No. So let's talk, does that change the governor's role? Do you feel a special sense of leadership on the economy? How are you thinking about that? I know you've been an actor at the federal level too, and observed federal discussions. Where are we? What's the role of the state?
No offense to the federal folks, I love them all dearly, but it's actually at the state level where you actually get things done. As governor, I don't have filibusters and things like that. I got to make a decision every day. And if you're focused on job creation, I do view that. And listen, I ran for governor. This was my whole platform. And everything I've tried to do, and I say to legislators who come to see me, does this help us create one job? If it doesn't, then don't waste my time. Because listen, folks, I am under the gun because of sequestration. We don't have the luxury. We got to get this done, and I'm moving at warp speed to get it done. As I say, we've had great success. So things happen at the state level. The reason is you can execute. You want to make a decision. The best thing, I do think governor's the best job in America. You want to make a decision, or you make a decision, you can get it done through executive order. Now, I have to work, obviously, on different issues with my legislature. They're in for 45 days this year. But I'm sitting in that desk 365 days a year, every single day. There's no let up. I'm on call 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. And I do enjoy it. The different time zones, there's nobody at any time of day I can't call.
We're seeing some states, we've worked a lot in Colorado with Governor Hickenlooper on the space industry. We've worked very closely on the other side of the aisle with Governor Haslam in Tennessee. And I think there's a ferment where some of these states are assuming new responsibilities in the absence of other action.
Or the absence of their ability to work together in a bipartisan way to get things done. We're at gridlock here. This is not, everybody in this room would agree with that. Things aren't happening, which to a governor, just as an American citizen, I'm dismayed over it because it is a global economy. Do you think other nations around the globe, do you think China's waiting around or Germany or any of these other economies? No. And they are at gridlock today. The partisan bickering that goes on today is really impacting our ability to compete. That's why, as I say, at the state level, I don't have time for it. Yeah. We got to get it done. And I have a very good working relationship with members of the other side, especially on the money committees. We all sit down like adults. We may disagree on issues on the party of the other side. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but you negotiate, you compromise. And I think what's happened, this loss of ability to sit in a room and compromise, it's really destroying, I think, the American fabric and our ability to be competitive. I will sit down with anybody at any time to negotiate a deal. I don't get everything I want. Nobody does. You got to compromise. It's not a bad word, Mark. And that's sort of been lost. I know we're talking manufacturing, but I do think this political gerrymandering of districts has created this. I think it has done such damage to democracy where candidates, elected officials do not have competitive races. 80% of members of Congress are guaranteed to win election. The only way they have any competition is challenges within their primaries. So it pushes people to the right and it pushes people to the left. And the middle is gone. I am a very fiscally conservative, pro-business Democrat. I'm very socially progressive. I believe government ought to be out of people's individual lives. I try to operate in the middle. And I think that's where most people are, but it's unfortunately with this, they get pushed because of these partisan primaries, and we get rid of this partisan gerrymandering, you have nonpartisan drawing of lines, I think America would be in much better stead.
When we talk about these things you need in advanced industries, sort of what are the absolute minimum commitments you need from the nation, the federal government, as opposed to what you can do yourself.
Well,
as
yeah,
a
you
state.
can't
I
have.
mean, there are limits, right? I mean, things like R&D, for instance, are crucial.
Yeah, but on the federal side, I mean, listen, we are very competitive on our R&D tax credit, our angel investor tax credit.
Yeah.
Our R&D tax credit, it's refundable. Refundable in cash, which is, gives us a huge advantage. We do grant programs, we do loan programs. If you want to invest in Virginia in the biotech space, if you come in as an investor or, as one of the founders, we give you a long-term capital gains exclusion. You don't ever pay any long-term taxes in Virginia. So we have to develop our own tax code. But you raise an important question. There is all of this money sitting offshore with American companies. Now, I don't sit here and bash these CEOs of companies who have this money, because at the end of the day, they have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to maximize profit. That's their job. So let's redo our tax laws here so that, guess what? You can bring that money back and you are maximizing shareholder return. That's what they should focus on. And if they could get that figured out, the billions and billions of U.S. dollar company money that's sitting offshore that would like to come back to our great country and create jobs here, that should happen. If they didn't do anything but fix that, Mark, we'd be in much better position.
That's your short list then. That would be.
That's my short and long list.
That's good. Well,
there's capital sitting out, bring it back. But I'm not going to sit here and listen. CEO has to put the money in investment where he or she's going to get the best return on investment. That is their job. So I'm not going to criticize that. What I will criticize is our inability to make our tax code to allow them to bring that money back and maximize shareholder dollars.
Channel that opportunity.
Of course.
Well, why don't this has been excellent. Why don't we open this out to some questions from the audience? Got a few minutes. Great. Yep.
With recent elections of Governor Hogan and Mayor Bowser, you're now the elder statesman.
Yeah, can you believe it already?
Share what you see as unrealized opportunities for collaboration among Maryland, D.C., and Virginia that would realize your vision for a diversified economy.
And listen, I called Muriel the day she won. I called Larry Hogan the day he won. I'm actually convening a meeting of all three of us in Northern Virginia. I think it's February 16th. We're all getting together to talk about this, how we act regionally. Because you're right. Listen, we want jobs in Virginia. Governor Hogan wants them. The mayor wants. We get that. But also, and I just came up last week and had lunch with Mayor Bowser to talk about this. When we all work in concert together, boy, there's nobody that can beat us. Honestly, can beat this region because we have it all with the education and, we've got NIH, which is funding all the biotech space and all that. So I agree with it. We're all working together. So as I say, I'll be convening a meeting. We're all linked intrinsically through our metro system, of course. So that is a natural because of the new Silver Line. And you look at what has happened with this new Silver Line for Virginia, for Tyson's Corner. I mean, the new Wheelie Ave station, I just read a report, $1.8 billion new economic development just since this was announced. Will then go on into Dulles and then into Loudoun County. Huge opportunities for us. So you're right, all of us working together. We are competitive because, we want as much in our own respective states. But I do think, and we'll meet on the 16th with a common core plan of what we need to do to bring businesses to the region. And then we'll scrap it out a little bit. But there, when you bring someone to a region, as you know, there's jobs for all three of us because they'll live somewhere or so forth. But it's a good question. As I say, I'm taking the lead and inviting everybody in Northern Virginia on the 16th.
We've got a good-sized advanced industry agenda for you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, cybersecurity, obviously, let's cut right to the chase. This is the one area that the federal government is going to plus up and spend billions of dollars on. We have all the assets in the region, as you know. And this will be, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, Defense, all of them interrelated. So that should be, respectfully, this new campus that needs to be in our region here. And that's a perfect opportunity. These are going, and I tell you, I have 5 children. I tell them all the time, cybersecurity, say, go into cybersecurity. I'm trying to, my oldest daughter, she loves philosophy, and I think that's great. And she just graduated, and I love her dearly. I have a son at the Naval Academy. He's going to the Marines next year. He's taken care of it. But the 3 youngest, I am working the cyber piece every single day because they are the jobs of the future.
Your own selling job at home, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. Any more? Let's see.
Here's one right.
Just any other? Let's go to the back of the room though. Anything?
Yeah, no, see this woman right here. Yeah.
Thanks for the governors, and I appreciate your presentation, and I appreciate your optimistic. But I think one thing you should answer is what's the problem in the United States? What's the problem in Maryland or even in Rockville? The one you present is so optimistic, but I suppose you didn't really discuss the point. What's wrong now? America is people don't like capitalism because they don't think it's working. They forget about fairness. Okay. They forget about justice, and they use misleading project. Excuse me.
I think questions about.
My question is here: would you be able to really, based on fairness and justice, to see how you can improve our society, including economics and job and housing and everything? What you are saying is, if you can spend the federal money of taxpayers' money, you can help some corporation to.
So I think it's a question about maintaining the competitiveness of the U.S. and U.S. strength.
What I try to say is, based on the real basics, just simply fairness and justice to promote the general welfare of the general public. Forget about tax rate if they are not helping the general public.
Okay, let's let the governor respond. Yeah, I think talking about the overall competitiveness of the United States and maybe that there's a lack of recognition of that at a time right now.
That we're not being competitive?
Right. Yeah, I think yes.
Well, I think we're being.
The other view, right?
Yeah, I would take the other view. I think we're being very competitive. Listen, our national economy is rebounding. As you saw, unemployment, they just came out for the nation as well. I think it was the lowest level we've had since like 2000. The unemployment rate has gone down dramatically. Stock market's at an all-time high. I think America is being very competitive. In fact, I won't mention names. I think I've hosted 22 ambassadors from around the globe to the mansion. In the last year, I'm trying to make it like the UN, encouraging these ambassadors to do business. I just met with the finance minister up here the other day for breakfast of a major country who said they're going to put $35 billion into the United States in the next 5 years because of the strength of our economy. I think if you look at China, why have they decided? I think for a lot of reasons. I think historically they'd gone over and done a lot of investment in Africa, and through a lot of reasons they're not as comfortable there. They've made a strategic decision. They're going to invest more here in the United States of America. I think all based on the strength of our economy and the resilience of the U.S. economy. I mean, I'm the ultimate optimist, but I'm really optimistic. I think we're in a very good shape. The key issue, and I think this will be the key issue in the presidential campaign, is the middle class income, take-home pay for many Americans has dropped dramatically. And the challenge is going to be, when I talk about jobs, folks, to me, it is a job that pays well with benefits. A job should automatically, I'm not talking about someone who has to go work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Quality jobs. That's why this is so important, because these are all high-paying jobs, and it gets the standard of living up for everybody. But our challenge in this country, and the people in the middle, rightfully, feel squeezed and have been squeezed economically. So making sure as we grow, there is a sense of fairness that everybody has an opportunity at that.
Do you think people perceive this swath of industries as relevant to their household fortunes? I mean, there's clearly the perception that some of these industries have high paying, often PhD level or advanced degree jobs, and I think it seems like you've spoken a bit about
well,
that.
we do in Virginia, and I hope for the next 3 years they don't quite figure it out till I'm out of office. So, I do realize it. We realize it. These are the future jobs. They're there. The metrics alone speak to it. Just look at the data. And as I say, in Northern Virginia, they average $100,000 versus $65,000. These are very high-paying jobs. And I can sit with one CEO after another up here in Northern Virginia, and Governor, I need this number, I need this number, I need this number of employees, and they're all good-paying jobs. So, you get on that.
Good. Any more questions? Yeah, Antoine.
You said a few words earlier about this, I think you called it the CCAM, or
Yes,
the
sir.
Commonwealth Campus.
Yeah.
And you mentioned 5 universities and 21 companies. Can you talk a little, I'd never heard of it, frankly, and I live in Washington.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit more about who are these universities? What are they good at? What are the companies? Why were they attracted, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a very creative idea. It's been in Virginia for several years now, and the companies do it so that they are able to pool their resources and have access to university research and development. So we bring them together, and there's different layers of, there's the gold level and so forth of how much they pay a year. I think the top, what's the top you have to pay? $500,000 a year, is it? Yeah. $400,000 a year. And it goes down for different companies. At the $400,000 level, everybody has access to all the research and data. Universities love it, and they pay to actually join it because it incentivizes their professors that they have. I mean, universities, and one thing I'm trying to break down a little bit in Virginia, we've had too many silos. We need to do a better job of commercializing our great research and development at our universities. We need to incentivize our professors. I am all for if they come up with some great technology, they ought to be able to make money doing that, but we need more collaboration. And listen, I know it's hard. Every university has to worry about their own university, and they want to have the best and the latest product. But when you can bring them together and they work in one room together, it really turbocharges your research and development for a state. And we're in it, the state's in it, our team works with them every single day, and we're constantly bringing in, every month or two I go to a signing ceremony where a new private sector company has come in to become partners of it. They love it. Why do they do it? They pool their resources, unlimited access to the research and development. It's UVA, Virginia Tech, many of our top universities that we have, and the universities get access to the private sector to work with the private sector so that they can take their whatever research they have, and the private companies will take it out to the market, and they will likewise make money. It's a very unique concept. It's called CCAM. It's the Commonwealth for Advanced Manufacturing, Center for Advanced Manufacturing. It's a beautiful state-of-the-art building that we have. It's, right outside Richmond. And, you ought to come down and take a visit of it. It really is state-of-the-art. And every time I go there, it's really exciting with these scientists and professors and all the latest R&D they have going.
I mean, this is I think a state innovation that's been influential on, the federal manufacturing hubs. In some ways, I think the idea came from that. Well, I think it's time to bring this to a close, I think. And to that, I just want to thank the full lineup of outstanding leaders we've had today, Antoine, Dom, and our friends from McKinsey, all 6 of the industry leaders, and as well as yourself. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling, we've got some strong leadership on deck at a time, obviously, of great opportunity and challenge, given the speed of things. And I hope you all in the audience have a new appreciation for the importance of some of these industries and the sense in which really they're quite different than maybe one imagines in particular areas. So we have a lot to do to ensure they flourish. And I'm pretty certain that their growth is a prerequisite to getting a handle on our broader economic challenges. Without a vibrant advanced industry sector, we're not going to have broadly shared opportunity in this country. So I think that's critical. So I'd just like to say Brookings and McKinsey, I know, are committed to staying with the story, to continue working on this. We hope many of you will remain interested. And with that, I'd like to say good day. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, and we will talk to you soon.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. This is great.